Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll begin with an invocation led by Councilmember Parker, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Smith. Please rise as you're able.
Tonight, open our eyes that we may see the needs of others. Open our ears that we may hear their cries. Open our hearts that we may feel their anguish and their joy. Let us not be afraid to defend the oppressed, the poor, the powerless, because of the anger and the might of the powerful. Show us where love and hope and faith are needed, and use us to bring them to those places. Be with us tonight so we may be able to do the work of moving our beautiful city of Knoxville closer and closer toward justice and peace. Thank you.
Please face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, would you please call roll?
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilwoman Helsley.
Here.
Councilwoman McKenzie. Councilwoman Parker.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryder. Here. Councilman Roberto.
Here.
Councilwoman Singh. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
And Councilman Thomas. All members present, Mayor.
Okay, next item is approval of the minutes from your last meeting. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there any items to be withdrawn from tonight's agenda? Are there any items to be postponed? Councilmember McKenzie?
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Frost made me aware that there's still some work being done as relates to item 10B, and would like to postpone that one.
To 2 weeks, 4 weeks?
2 weeks.
Okay. Councilmember McKenzie moves to postpone item 10B for 2 weeks. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other items to be postponed? Councilmember McKenzie, your light's still on? No? Okay. Any items requested to be added by motion? Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, time now for my mayor's report. I hope everyone had a wonderful Labor Day weekend. I know you joined me in being grateful for the many people over the last decades and who have made holidays and 40-hour work weeks and other things possible for Knoxville and our whole country. So it was always fun to acknowledge that on Labor Day. I also wanted to let you all know that we have more good things to celebrate. We have a new urgent care center in North Knoxville. It's Cherokee Health Systems is going to be cutting the ribbon on the new urgent care center that will be part within the Empath unit on St. Mary Street. So that's the facility on the campus of the city's public safety complex. You know, over the summer, we opened up the mental health component of that, and we always promised the community that there would be urgent care clinic available in that same site. So this was part of our vision, and it's happening. So we are going to celebrate the addition of more medical services or return of medical services in that part of the city on Wednesday, September 11th at noon. So I hope you can join us. It's an important fulfillment of a promise we've made to the community, and we're very grateful for Cherokee Health for helping us, partnering with us to make that possible. More fun things happening this weekend is the 11th annual Knox Asian Fest. This multicultural event will take place at World's Fair Park and will include a special VIP event Saturday evening and an all-day festival on Sunday. There will be more than 40 food vendors, a lot of performance stages, and lots of fun. So to get tickets and help support this family-friendly event, go to knoxasianfestival.com. Just a quick reminder about our rules of decorum. Those who wish to speak either to a specific agenda item or during public forum should sign up with the city recorder before 4 p.m. Please do not use profanity, and when speaking to specific agenda items, please remember to stay on topic. Robert's Rules of Order state that remarks must be germane to the question ahead of the assembly. That is, statements must have bearing on whether the pending motion should be adopted. Those who fail to adhere to these rules may be ruled out of order and asked to step away from the podium. For those who are listening, please note, you may not disrupt a public meeting from the audience. Those who do may be asked to leave. Thank you in advance for your respect for these rules. And that concludes my mayor's report. Are there any reports from council members? Let's see. Yes, many. We'll go with Councilmember Helsley.
Yes, thank you. This might have been mentioned last meeting since I wasn't here, but a few weeks ago, the Firefighters Association held an emergency medical services workshop, and there were a couple of my colleagues and I were there. And I always knew what they did, but they went through everything they do in these life-saving emergencies, and I just want to give a shout out to the firefighters and anybody who lives in the city of Knoxville. I think can rest assured that they are in safe hands if they have a medical emergency. So congrats to them.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, there's big news regarding tenants' rights in Knoxville. Legal Aid of East Tennessee has opened a new office for its eviction prevention program at 4450 Walker Boulevard. They had an official opening on August 8th. And since its inception in November of 23, the eviction prevention program has handled 357 cases and prevented 166 evictions. This program needed its own space to make it more accessible. There's a large parking lot, so parking will be easier, and it's also on a bus line. To paraphrase some of my lawyer friends at Legal Aid, the eviction prevention program is providing legal advice and representation to tenants that don't know their rights when it comes to fair housing, discrimination, unfair lockouts by property owners, and how to handle issues surrounding repairs and basic maintenance. They also work with domestic violence cases to help make certain that the home is a safe place. Their number is 865-371-8730. And then again, that address is at 4450 Walker Boulevard. Thank you. And one other item, Reimagination Cat just kicked off, and we are happy that that's going on. Were you going to make a report on that?
That's okay here.
Okay, well, I'm going to make yours brief. I'll make it brief, and then you can do it. Okay. Anyway, so you get an opportunity to give this a go, and it's free up until this Sunday. It's state-of-the-art stuff. You've got air-conditioned buses, you've got Wi-Fi, you've got hybrid and electric buses. The routes have been changed and tweaked. And everybody, you owe it to yourself to give it a try. And it got me here tonight, as it often does. So I would encourage everybody to go ahead and at least explore CAT. And I think you might be pleased with some of the improvements. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to let everyone know that I'll be partnering with the Knoxville chapter of the NAACP, hosting a neighborhood discussion on the upcoming charter amendments on Thursday, September 12th at 6 p.m. at Bearden United Methodist Church, which is located at 4407 Sutherland Avenue in West Knoxville in the Bearden area. So just wanted to let everyone know I was doing that. I know that there will be others that will be coming as well from other parts of town, but we're excited to get started with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. So Councilmember Roberto went ahead and just did the grand opening for me. I'm also announcing a partnership with the NAACP. This Thursday at 6 o'clock at their general body meeting, they will be discussing and going over the charter amendments as well. That's 6 o'clock at the Beck Center. Everyone is welcome to attend. And then also just wanted to mention to everyone that the Tennessee Valley Fair will be kicking off September the 6th through the 15th. You can go to their website and find out all about the specials and more information about the entertainment. Thank you.
Okay. we've got a lot of, let's see, Councilmember Parker?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to announce another discussion that'll be taking place about the charter amendments coming up on September 14th. Ooh. Let me double check that date. That's a Saturday at Clinton Chapel. On Western Avenue. And I believe that meeting begins at 1 p.m., but it's an afternoon meeting, September 14th. You can find out more information by contacting me directly at Clinton Chapel, and all are invited.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Helsley?
Sorry, I'm back. I was going to jump on a little bit to what he said about CAT. Director Thorne, who I don't think's here, had sent us an update that the weekday ridership has increased 28% since the date of inception, which was, I think, August 26th. The weekend service level has improved over 150% with expanded hours, and they provided close to 13,000 rides on Saturday and 4,300 on Sunday. And also, staff and Isaac, they're working on the adjustments to the routes impacted by the Gay Street Bridge closure. So they're doing a temporary detour, so anybody that's on Route 40 knows there's an issue, but they're continuing to work on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to wish Councilmember Thomas a birthday for next week, and a belated birthday for Councilwoman Ryder, who celebrated
50.
another decade of life on Earth. So,
Okay. I think that concludes council members' reports. So we will move on to item 8.
8A is a resolution appointing Clarence McDowell to serve as the 5th District Representative on the Knoxville Golf Course Advisory Committee for a term expiring September 2, 2028.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10A is a resolution approving the appeal by R. Bentley Marlowe of the Board of Zoning Appeals' denial of a request to overturn the zoning administrator's determination that the historical non-conforming use of the structure located at 2448 Jefferson Avenue was abandoned after the utilities were disconnected for a period exceeding 24 months, and thereby reversing the zoning administrator's determination, 6th District.
Okay, council members, on these zoning appeals, as you know, there's up to 3 people can speak in favor, up to 3 opposed. They'll each have no more than 5 minutes, and then there's an opportunity for a 2-minute rebuttal. There's 3 people signed up to speak in favor of this item, and we'll start with them in the order in which they signed up. First is Bentley Marlowe. Mr. Marlowe, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
R. Bentley Marlowe, 322 Douglas, 37921. Okay, so this is concerning the same structure that we were here maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. Structure at that time was determined to be an accessory structure by Mr. Ahrens, and I challenged that. He was calling it an ADU because of a 50-amp plug. And you guys agreed with Mr. Ahrens and called it an ADU. Since that time, I've gone to BZA, and BZA determined that that is, in fact, a single-family house. That single-family house has been listed as a separate dwelling unit and house in the city directory since at least 1948, and appears on multiple older Sanborn maps. So we're talking about destroying a house administratively. And the reason that we're having this discussion is in our zoning code, it says that if utilities have been disconnected for a period of 24 months, the house or structure is deemed abandoned. Well, the house is still there. And what happened, the homeowner during COVID, to save the $100 minimum charge from KUB, had the utilities shut off because it was vacant. She personally didn't feel comfortable renting it at that point in time in the condition it was in. We have now moved on from COVID. The world's breathing easier. Nobody's as stressed as they were. And she has been diligently wanting to restart development of that and fixing it up so it could become a rental unit. And along her way of doing this, she first called KUB to say, hey, turn my power back on. KUB would not let her turn her power back on without getting a city inspection. She attempted to get that inspection by herself. However, the new policy by Plans Review and Inspection is that a licensed electrician must pull a permit in order for there to be a safety inspection. That's where I come in. Ms. Wolf contacted me and asked me if I could pull the permit. I went out and looked at the structure. I believe that the electrical wiring was safe enough to get the power back on, and I called in for the safety inspection, and the electrical inspector agreed with me. And in January, they reconnected the power. However, when Ms. Wolf then attempted to get a building permit, it all came off the rails. It was first called an accessory structure, said she was trying to make it an ADU. Then when we determined it was a single-family home, they've used this 24-month of no power against her, saying that it's been abandoned and it can no longer be a home. We took that to BZA, and in BZA, if you read through the minutes, you would find that a majority of the BZA members actually disagree with the zoning code. If you look on page 37 of your packet, you'll see where Mr. Daniel Odom said, quote, I disagree with the code, end quote. On page 39, you'll see where Chair Christina Buller says, quote, it's really unfair, end quote. On page 40, you'll see Mr. Odell, again, evidence in the record, quote, I disagree with the standard, end quote. So, BZA wanted it to come to you guys because changing the code has to originate with you. So the real question here is, do we want to administratively dissolve and destroy homes in the midst of a housing crisis merely because the power has been shut off for an arbitrary number of months? I'd also like to note that state law sets that number of months at 30. So our zoning code is already in conflict with state law. That's really all I have to say on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on this item is Parker Bartholomew. Mr. Bartholomew, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Parker Bartholomew, 5406 Summit Ridge Lane, 37921. As Bentley stated, this process started to save a dwelling back in January. Multiple mistakes have been made to get us to this point today. 2 months ago, we were here arguing about this home being an ADU. This building has been a single-family house since 1948. It was never an ADU or a garage apartment. We had to file a second BZA appeal just in order to get a determination on what the use was actually abandoned. For some reason, Plans Review did not inform the homeowner that this existing use was a house. It would have prevented the BZA hearing and the appeal from 2 months ago. Only when we did a record search on the city's free database, this is a free database that's available to everybody, including City Plans and Review, did we find out that this was a house. Tennessee abandonment of property rights requires intent by the owner to abandon. At no time did this owner intend to terminate the use. Water and sewer were not disconnected for 20 months. I think it's also prudent to look at the timing of when the power was shut off. This was early 2021. We were in the middle of COVID. The owner is an attorney, and the courts were shut down much longer than other industries. Cash flow to do the repairs, finding workers, and affordable material was incredibly difficult. The property was not zoned appropriately during recode. There were multiple primary structures to include a single-family house and duplex on this property. The property across the alley received an RN5 zoning, but not this one. Not zoning this RN5 was an oversight by city and/or planning staff. The use of this property is multifamily. Because you turn off the power to one unit, you do not lose the use for multifamily development. This property fits perfectly in the RN5 zoning. It meets the lot area and requirements. RN5 allows for multiple structures, again, an oversight by staff. We're in the worst housing crisis any of us have experienced. We do not have enough homes, and the ones that we do have are too expensive. Since 1970, over 1 million single-room occupancy dwellings have been eliminated through zoning laws. Duplexes, group homes, ADUs, all are outlawed. Our zoning codes are the #1 reason we lack the supply of housing. We can trace the affordable housing and homelessness problem directly to an increase in zoning laws. We have created an artificial scarcity, and affordable housing developments now require millions in taxpayer dollars to get done. Now in Knoxville, however, we've started to move in the right direction. MMH will allow a density that can change this. So why would we eliminate a house that's in the TDR, it's been there for 75 years, and that's been paying a commercial tax rate? If we applied missing middle to this property, we would have a fourplex by right in its current zoning, but that would require us to demolish the houses that are on it. If single-family houses were allowed in missing middle, we could apply it to this parcel and move on. But we made a mistake not allowing single-family houses in missing middle. At multiple steps, planning review, zoning, building department, and staff has made mistakes on this parcel. The impact of those mistakes are that we will lose a home. Tonight is an opportunity to right many of those wrongs. A vote tonight in support of this appeal will provide a home for someone. Do not weaponize the zoning code and continue to make the same mistakes that put us in this position. Please do not remove a house that's so incredibly needed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak in favor of item 10A is Rachel Wolf. Ms. Wolf, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part of the sentence.
I'm sorry, you have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank
But
you.
start by stating your name and address, please.
Okay. Rachel Wolf, 3317 Valley Forge Drive. So I'm the homeowner. I have purchased it, I think like 6 or 7 years ago. And one of the things I think they mentioned was that I am paying a 40% tax rate. And that's not because it's a duplex, it's because it has 3 properties on it, 3 residences. The third unit is the reason why it is a 40% tax rate. It's also why my home insurance for that property is double what it should be. So I estimate $10,000 or more that I've paid just to have it be able to stay 3 units on that property. If I would have asked for that property to be condemned or knocked down, I could have petitioned the city at that point to make it, again, just a residential and have it knocked down to a regular rate. But I didn't do that. One of the reasons why I took off the utilities was I was having to pay a significant amount every month, and it wasn't safe. There was homeless people in the area who were coming in and living in the unit. We were having to deal with potential them plugging things in, and so one of the reasons I did it was to save costs during COVID, as well as for the safety of that unit so it didn't get burned down. It's the city's burden to prove that the non-conforming use was abandoned. The primary elements of abandonment are the intent to abandon and the external act by which the intent was carried into effect. It must be clearly established by clear and unequivocal evidence of a decisive act of the party showing its determination not to have the benefit in question with full knowledge of their rights to the premises. This is from Lamar, quoting Pruitt v. Bunch, 101 TN 723. It's an 1898 case. There's also good Tennessee Supreme Court case showing that in order to justify the conclusion that there has been an abandonment, there must be some clear and unmistakable affirmative act indicating a purpose to repudiate the ownership. That's from Woods v. Bonner, 89 Tennessee 411 from, I don't have the year cut off on that, sorry. But I don't think the city is anywhere close to meeting its burden on that just by me turning off the utilities for, I think it was a 20-month period. I did not request that KUB sever my sewer tap, nor did I request KUB remove my electrical service lateral or water meter horn. The water meter horn and water tap were also left in place. KUB just needed to reinsert the plug and the meter to restart the service. It's still a valid postal address. If you go to send mail to Unit 3, it is still considered a valid address with the United States Postal Service. I didn't seek any recourse on getting my taxes lowered back to a rate that would conform with a 2-unit property. When I was not also aware that the city would consider this abandoned just by turning off the utilities, and I think my knowledge of waiving those rights is something that's required. I went through the process that I was told I needed to do. The Planning Review and Inspection Committee are the ones who told me that it wasn't a habitable structure, even though I later found out about 2 months later after going through all the permitting process that it was a habitable structure. So wasting months of my time, and if they would have done it correctly from the beginning, they would have just issued me the correct permit, and we would have had even less delay on keeping the power and the utilities turned off. They didn't properly review their records. They issued an electrical permit for the structure, conducted an on-site inspection, and then authorized KUB to reinstall the electrical meter, thus restoring the historical non-conforming use of the single-family dwelling. And then the city required me to endure months of delay, challenging their determination that the structure was an accessory dwelling unit rather than the historical single-family dwelling unit the city records confirmed that it was. My act of challenging that determination...
Ms. Wolf, that concludes your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, there's no one who's spoken, who's signed up to speak in opposition to this appeal. So the floor is yours for discussion. Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah. I have a question. I'm going to start off with a question to either Mr. Frost or Mr. Swanson. When is the commercial tax rate implemented for rentals or, I mean, that is not implemented by the city, it's implemented by the tax assessor,
Property-
but is that part of our code?
Mr. Frost?
Because I don't know that 3 units is the trigger.
Yeah,
I just want to
I don't know
clarify
what-
that.
Boys, Mr. Evans, would you happen to know that?
I do not know what triggers it. We get the roll from the county assessor's office and, delineates whether it's residential, commercial, and so forth.
Okay, I feel some certainty that that is applied at times to even single-family residences that are run as rentals, but no one here knows. No one here knows,
I
okay.
think that's a question for the property assessor, or would require further investigation.
Mr. Swanson,
It is. That's really the kind of question that we need advance notice that somebody's going to ask that question so that we can do the necessary research to answer the question, because Mr. Frost may know everything about all the laws related to the city of Knoxville, but I do not, and don't even claim to. So if it's a complicated question that's esoteric, please let us know in advance you want to ask that question.
they just testified that that was what their rate was based upon, so. I'll let my colleagues ask questions. at this
Okay,
point.
Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. So we don't have anyone here today from BZA, do we?
Peter Ahrens, Director Ahrens is here.
Okay. Mr. Ahrens, could you come to the podium, please? Thank you. Question, and so I'm going to go back to Ms. Wolf, and it sounds as if she was not aware that the property would be considered abandoned. And I think that that's probably common for most lay people, that they would not know that. Is there any, tell me what mechanism would a person know that this standard of the code is out there for if a person's interested in doing something with their property, or, I mean, it just seems a little out of order in a sense. So could you tell me how a person would know this?
Peter Ahrens, Director of Plans Review and Building Inspections. They would have to read the zoning code. They would have to actually read the code. We don't keep track of which properties KUB takes power from, and We do track when they reinstall power to make sure that it's safe, but we don't keep track of every property and when power is turned off, if it is. So they'd have to do their research.
Okay. And to your knowledge, and you may or may not know this, does KUB advise people of that if the power is off for a certain
I don't know.
number of months, that property would be considered abandoned?
I do not know that answer.
Okay, and I don't think we have anyone here that could answer that question. But that's a critical piece of information, I think, for people to know when they're, if they're disconnecting power, because the structure's not being used for a certain period of time. I think that would have made a difference had Ms. Wolf known that. So I'm going to let other people speak, and I'll come back. Thank you.
Councilmember Singh? Oh, Vice Mayor Smith, I'm sure.
Thank you, Tom. Councilwoman McKenzie, I had a situation where an uncle of mine passed away, and we were looking for his heir, looking for his son. So I had called to turn the power off after a couple months because we were paying the basic fees. KUB does not say that, be careful, this can trigger that intent. But yeah, that house sat abandoned without power for 3 years. Our intent was never to abandon it. We were in process. So I could see how time goes by and how someone's intent can be one thing, but not knowing the rules, not tending to that piece.
Vice Mayor Smith, and then I'll go back to Councilmember Ryder.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Anderson, would you make your way back up front just to get your steps in? I find this to be very complex or not so clear for a number of reasons. I do appreciate the layperson's lack of knowledge of discontinued use or abandonment, but there are many things in the zoning code that nobody knows until they read it or learn it or build a thing. So there are many laws on the books, as attorneys will know, that people don't necessarily know all of their rights, and that doesn't, prevent them from being from breaking the law accidentally or unintentionally. So not knowing the rules is not necessarily a good argument in my opinion of this. I did Ms. Wolf, mentioned intent to abandon. And I think in the BZA meeting, there was a lot of use of that word, abandonment. And I think when we generally hear that word, we mean picking up and leaving. But in the zoning code of 17.1C that was referenced in the BZA case and is relevant here, it's discontinuation or abandonment. It's not just general use of abandonment. And for what it's worth, I believe the appellant has not been so clear as to what actually they're advocating for in this case. So for what it's worth, I think last time we were here, we heard argument that this was just maybe another building to be used for an art studio. So I think you lose sincerity when you move the goalpost as to what you're trying to achieve, and it seems as if you're trying every door to see what will open. With that said, that doesn't mean that the administrator is always right. And so I think I would like your clarity on, we are asked to evaluate whether your determination that a historical non-conforming use of the structure was abandoned after utilities were disconnected. So back to the discontinuation or abandonment, can you walk through the criteria that you use as an administrator to evaluate discontinued use or abandonment?
Sure.
We obviously have heard the electric utilities being turned off, but what other things do you look at to evaluate abandonment or discontinued use?
So the reason this is an issue, it's not an issue with every house. It's just because this is a non-conforming property.
Right.
We've got, it's zoned RN2. RN2 in 9.1D says multiple principal uses are not permitted in the EN, the RN1, and RN2 districts. So it's important to understand that it's a non-conforming lot that was legal. And so when we go to 17.1, the nonconformities, if a nonconforming use is discontinued for a continuous period of 24 months and is not actively marketed, the nonconforming use terminates automatically, Any subsequent use of such land or structure must comply with all regulations of the zoning district in which the structure or land is located. So that's pretty clear to me that if the use is discontinued. So when the electric meter was removed in 2021, the structure couldn't be used as a dwelling in that condition without electricity.
Yeah, I think in the BZA comments, you mentioned you need electricity to live in it.
You do.
What I'm asking for is, what other uses do you look at to evaluate continuity of use or discontinued use? Do you look at, are the taxes being paid? Do you look at, are they receiving mail? I know you mentioned marketed or, the electrical bill.
Sure.
What other items or aspects do you look at to evaluate use or discontinued use?
We generally don't, let me make sure I'm understanding the
Yeah.
question.
Is it just electricity? Is that all you're looking at? 'Cause
In
there
this
was a
scenario, it was, yes.
Okay.
It could be a million things. It
Right.
could be no sewer, no water. If the house is gutted, if the structure is gutted
Okay.
and left for 24 months, it's not a house if there's nothing inside.
So there's not a 10 criteria checklist that you look at for whether the use is being continued or discontinued?
No.
Okay. And that's what you're for as the administrator, is to evaluate each of these in that regard? And one more question. The electricity was turned off for 23 months, is that correct?
I believe it was turned off in 21 and reestablished in 24.
Okay.
So it's been more than 24 months.
Okay. And the 24-month requirement is associated with that evaluation of discontinued or continued use?
That's correct.
Okay. I may have some more questions, but that's it for now. Thank you.
I can say that we accept a lot of, if something is actively marketed, we try and work with applicants, and if they show us anything, we'll do a quick Google search.
And for what it's worth, I genuinely believe Mrs. Wolf's word that she was just kind of temporarily paused on using it. And I also believe her word that she doesn't necessarily know that pause necessitates a classification of abandonment or discontinued use. With that said, you're looking at that 24-month, and that's why I'm asking about the criteria you use to evaluate that period. I'll pause myself.
Okay, Councilmember Ryder and then Fugit.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First off, I want to clarify what I said, and thank you to Mr. Johnson for finding it online, but also to correct the record on the comments made about appraisal and taxation. So the State Comptroller's Office states for industrial and commercial property, all real property that is used for dwelling purposes that contains 2 or more rental units is classified as industrial and commercial property. So in my experience, so I was incorrect about the single family, but it's not correct about 3 or more units. It's 2 or more units. And I know that some properties with 2 units are not taxed at that rate, and some properties with more or less, and that is an inaccuracy at the county tax assessor's office if it's not taxed correctly, based on the number of units. But the comptroller's office and the state is 2 units or more, not 3. So just to clarify, that the tax rate would remain the same even if it's just the duplex on the property. Mr. Ahrens, I know you've gone back to your seat. I don't know if I have a question to you or not, but you can come forward just in case. So I will speak from the fact of prior to coming to council, I spent 7 years, and more than that, maybe 10 years as a board member in our neighborhood in Old North. And there are many historic neighborhoods around there, and it was very common that lots of houses would be chopped up into many units, sometimes 5, sometimes 7, sometimes they were commercial uses, sometimes they were residential. And we as a community in reclaiming our neighborhood and having people move back in when a lot of it was left and neglected was those uses. There's been a couple of statements made about abandonment and uninhabitable, but we're talking about, Mr. Ahrens, we're talking about use, like abandoning a use as a non-conforming right. Is that correct?
I would say that abandonment is also tied to discontinuation.
Okay. So when I was neighborhood president, one of the things we would talk about is when something was unoccupied for a period of time. Mr. Reynolds was the previous inspector, or I'm sorry, head of the building department prior to you. And the rule of thumb when Mr. Reynolds was around was two years, I believe, but it was unoccupied. So we had structures in our neighborhood that might be divided into a 5-unit dwelling, and once that was no longer occupied for a period of time and not actively marketed, so even if it had utilities connected to it and somebody was paying a bill, it was still an abandonment of that use, and it was non-conforming. So you're saying your current standard is something more stringent than that. It's like that there were no utilities and the meter was removed. In this particular case, your analysis is that the utilities were disconnected, and so the structure is in an RN2 zone, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so the standard for the RN2 zone is no more than a duplex, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so the non-conforming use that's being backed away from because of the abandonment or removal of the utilities, which is your standard that you're using to apply, whereas in the past, it was just unoccupied, no one living there. I'm filling in the blanks as I know it prior to your being here. How about that?
Okay.
Okay, and for my colleagues, so what I hear is Mr. Ahrens is applying a higher standard than what was in the past,
Yes.
to my knowledge.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the standard for the RN2, because this is zoned to RN2, is for it to have a duplex or 2 units, but not 3 units. And that is what the request from Ms. Wolf is to be able to resume her 3 units.
Yes, ma'am.
But that was her non-conforming use.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I just, for my colleagues, this is a common measure that was applied in our neighborhoods decade after decade after decade. It was like this use has been discontinued and abandoned and is no longer allowed. And we have to have a standard for when the new zoning takes place. When do we honor the new zoning? Why, we've revised the zoning code more or less from a point of there was a time where we just didn't have, there was more of a wild, wild west and we didn't have that. And so either this council or prior councils decided that this was the standard for RN2 and Mr. Ahrens has to have a standard for how and when to apply and walk away from the acceptance of the non-conforming use.
Councilmember Fugit?
Thank you. Just a few comments. First of all, I am very sympathetic to the homeowner. I think it's one thing for those of us who have lived in the planning world and that kind of stuff to see this very easily. I do not, for the life of me, expect your average citizen, before they turn the power off to something, to go look at the zoning code and find out how long I can leave it off before it triggers something. I'm just saying that's real life. I mean, I could see having something on my property, decide I don't think I want to do that, but not truly go read the zoning code and then say, oh, I want to do that again. And never in my wildest dreams would I think that if it had been used for that, it couldn't be used for that. I understand the rules change. I'm just saying, I understand ignorance is no excuse for the law, but let's also be realistic that your average person isn't going to be that diligent before they turn the power off. Secondly, I will also say, and I understand what one of my colleagues was saying about, if I can't do it this way, then I'll try to see if I can get it done this other way. Developers do that all the time. If the zoning, we've had opportunities where developers come to us and they say, I want this rezoned to do this. They can't get that done, then they come back and say, now I want to do this because I own it and I want to generate some income from it. So I also think that's also reasonable for people to look for a way to use their property to the fullest. I struggle with this one because the law is the law, but I do think this is a very unique situation that isn't going to come up very often. And I just, have a real sympathy for the fact that if I'm a layperson going to do this myself and I turn my power off and don't walk away from it, that is discontinued use. I understand the letter of the law, it is, but I just think that's something that is very confusing, not something that you would think of top of mind. And if this is going to be the case, then I really do hope we can get KUB to start telling people when they do that you need to go check the zoning code because this could change what you use your property for. Because it happens with estates all the time. If an estate takes too long to settle, that's going to happen, so.
Thank you. Let's see, Councilmember Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. Couple questions. Mr. Frost, is there an issue with our city code and the state law? I know we heard some discussion about that. I wanted to make sure that I understood whether we were out of compliance or if there was something to do with that.
Thank you, Councilman. Well, I was listening to what Mr. Marlowe said, which caused me to open up our zoning code, because we've had a discussion and we've had some words used a little interchangeably when they're not necessarily synonymous for legal purposes. First, you have 17.1C, which is discontinuation or abandonment. And that talks about what Mr. Ahrens was saying, 24 months, and is not actively marketed, that the non-conforming use terminates automatically. And then a little bit about what I think Mr. Marlowe alluded to about not being in compliance with state law. 17.1D as in Delta talks about a non-conforming use of land, then talks about value and structures, may be continued for a period of not more than 3 years therefrom, provided, then has a couple of steps to it. So respectfully, I think that, we have what Mr. Ahrens was using was the appropriate standard, and what Mr. Marlowe was referencing, while it is a law, I'm not sure that that's the one that applies to this particular situation.
Okay, thank you. Director Ahrens? In listening to everything and looking at what we're seeing in the packet here, it seems like this whole discussion is about what the proper definition of abandonment is. Is that basically right? Or discontinued use?
Discontinued use.
So discontinued use is a better, okay. And then I know Councilmember Ryder mentioned a higher standard, and I guess I'm trying to understand the standard itself, whether it's higher or if you're just asking for the owner to have gone another step. So for the discontinued use, I would think that would include if you had a property and you just stopped doing whatever you were doing before for a period of time. Are you now requiring that the owner basically goes an additional step from I'm not using it right now to I'm going to turn the power off? So are you actually asking them to do another step, or can you clarify that for me?
I think what Councilman Ryder was saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was understanding is my predecessor just used a standard that wasn't necessarily codified, and it was if it's empty. Whereas my standard is we're not tracking empty houses. The elevated standard is they chose to take the power off. Was I understanding what you were saying correctly?
Yes, and the taking the power off is pretty good evidence that it was unoccupied because you can't dwell there without utilities.
So it's a higher standard for me, not necessarily for our customers.
Well, and that goes to what I was trying to get at. If the standard was it's empty, meaning it's not being used, right? Versus now it's not being used and I want another step and I turn the power off. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
It seems like you're saying you're giving them, they have to take an extra step for you to trigger your definition of discontinued use.
Correct.
Okay. And then, was there something more than just turning off the power that went on here? Was there something in addition to that happened? Or was it just simply call KUB and say, hey, shut the power down? Or do you know?
The city did not require power to be turned off, if that's what you're asking.
I'm not asking that. I'm just asking, was there something in addition to that? Is this as simple as I'm making a phone call, or am I actually calling KUB out to take their, the box out or whatever? Do you know?
I don't know that answer.
Okay. So that's just, but you are requiring an extra step. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Aaron's, if you'd stay at the podium. So once a property is deemed abandoned, I think you stated earlier that that's not something the city typically keeps up with. It only comes into play when someone pulls a permit or tries to do something. Then you look back and you see how long the utilities have been turned off. Okay.
Correct. And really, that only comes into play if it's a non-conforming property.
So if it
Because-
were a conforming property and the utilities were turned off?
Have at it.
Okay. So that's the differentiator there.
It's all about the non-conforming use.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Smith?
I have one more question. Ms. Wolf, you mentioned, could you come back up to the podium? I think you referenced, wait, Peter, I mean, unless you want more steps, like I said, you just, but hang on. You mentioned, you referenced the Tennessee state law and said intent to abandon. Could
Yes.
you restate that again?
Yeah, hold on one second. I apologize. I wasn't expecting on being able to be here tonight, so I didn't think I would be able to speak. Let's see, it was that in order to justify the conclusion that there has been an abandonment, there must be some clear and unmistakable affirmative act indicating a purpose to repudiate the ownership. Do you want the case law?
I think, I wrote down intent to abandon. Was there a quote?
The intent to abandon is considered the first and paramount inquiry. Abandonment may arise from a single act or from a series of acts. Time is not an essential element of abandonment and is of no importance except as indication of intention.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Aaron's, sorry, I was going to ask you to reply to that, but you were distracted. Did you hear that?
If this was about state law, I did not research state law.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that. That's okay. I do think that there are, I think the reason I bring that back is because I think I appreciate and can understand Mr. Aaron's decision on this. I do think that, but not exclusively that. I think if there was a clear intent to discontinue use and/or abandon and not just save money, I think that the property owner would have done more than just turned off the lights. I think because the water was still connected and a lot of other things, if you're done with the property and done with that use, we're all speculating here, but it seems to me most likely that you would turn the whole system off. If I had a rental property and I wasn't going to use it for a while or wasn't going to use it forever, I'd turn the whole, I don't want to spend money on any utility hooked up to that. So because it seems to me that you just turned the electricity off in the middle of COVID, to me, it doesn't seem like the property owner was fully done with the use of that. but this is in a gray area, and that's kind of where I lean. Also think that I'm not really sure of the ramifications of this decision, and I'm a fan to remind us not to think about that, and I'm not even going to ask the question. But given the nature of this appeal and its preceding appeal, I question the motive in some regard. However, I don't question the owner's motive of why they were pausing. I do think it was genuinely more of a pause than a discontinuing of use. So I'm inclined to support the property owner in this regard.
Councilmember Parker?
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a difficult one for me. I agree with a lot of what's been said tonight and a lot of what was shared at the Board of Zoning Appeals. And there's one item that's still unresolved for me, and I haven't been able to do the full research on it, but one of the board members mentioned a case, Custom Land Development versus Town of Coopertown. And this is a case in Tennessee where a landfill was left unused, unpermitted for an extended period of time, and so they lost their non-conforming use. However, the board member mentions that as a part of that opinion, I guess it was discussed that intent is only relevant where some force outside the control of the property owner prevents continued use of the land in a particular manner. And I'm not necessarily sure if this would even qualify under within the court's opinion of that, but I also am willing in many ways, many issues that have come before us that resulted from a decision or a process that played out during the pandemic. I'm much more sympathetic to homeowners who made choices in response to a pandemic and are now gaining a better understanding of what the consequences are of those choices. But I wish I had a little bit more information. I guess our legal counsel, you feel comfortable with that case?
I think that's the case, Councilmember Parker, where it talks about, like, if something burns to the ground, that's an involuntary abandonment, and it's not lost at that point. Mr. Swanson?
Seems to me that what's important here is that we are talking about a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Right.
If it were a conforming use, that wouldn't matter, and they could go forward. What has happened here is that we have kind of mixed into this some intentionality related to abandonment, and that language usually comes from cases related to billboards and things of that nature related to state law. This is simply a zoning code that says you can continue any kind of what would otherwise be an illegal use as long as you continue this use and don't discontinue this use for a period of time. What's that period of time? Used to be 6 months, now it's 2 years. And if you discontinue that pre-existing non-conforming use for 2 years, you don't have to intentionally abandon it. That's not what our language says in our zoning code. What it says, if you can discontinue that use, then you've lost the ability to claim that as a pre-existing non-conforming use, and you're going to need to come into conformance with the zoning code. Now, you can, I heard some argument that this is probably not great law and you don't like this law. Well, then you have to change that law. But you should probably follow that law as long as it continues on the books. And that's what our inspectors have done.
Well, that was quite clear guidance there, Mr. Swanson. I appreciate that. But really, I wanted to wrap up my comments by saying, I have a lot of sympathy and some questions that I do feel like have now been answered. And I agree that we have another case and issue that has been brought before us to make us aware of some potential changes needed to the code, but that's where we should take action as a council rather than through this process today.
Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. My question has already been asked by Councilmember Parker, so mine was around the clarity of conforming versus non-conforming and how it applies to the situation. So I also agree that it's difficult and very unfortunate, but it is what it is. And thank you.
Councilmember Ryder, and then Roberto.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say that our communities really depend on us to uphold pieces of our code such as this. When we have passed changes to our zoning ordinance in the past to disallow, let's talk about our use chart in the zoning code, because that's really what this is about, use, and what use is allowed in a certain zone. When we made changes, for example, when we did recode, there were changes that were made where certain uses weren't allowed in some places and some were allowed in new places. And this section of the code in 17.1 about non-conforming uses is what gives comfort and stability and certainty to our community. Because at that time, when new uses were allowed or certain uses were disallowed in a zone, the thing that you said to your constituents in the community was, this use is allowed as a non-conforming use in this code as long as it's continued. And once it is discontinued, per section 17.1, once it is continued for more than 24 months, that use is no longer allowed. And that's why this section is in the code, and it gives certainty to our community about when will certain uses go away. And I understand that we're talking about residential, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's something that you don't want to be next door to you and ended up there in the past because the zoning codes were and the uses allowed within certain areas were lax and or missing altogether. So at times, our constituents and community are asking for us to uphold this because it ties to them being able to enjoy and have quality use of their property. And so not knowing about this or alleging that the not knowing, and I feel that Mr. Ahrens is using an even higher standard than what has been implemented in the past to basically evidence that. Mr. Marlowe, I'm a little confused, and I'm not going to call Ms. Wolf because she wasn't here for that. When you filed the appeal about whether this was an ADU or not, you told us, you can come to the microphone if you'd like, you specifically at the ADU discussion appeal on the same property and the same structure, you told us it wasn't an ADU because it was a she shed and it's where ceramics and pottery was done and to be done.
You want my response?
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that's public record, but
Yes.
is that correct?
Well, that all begins with the information provided to Ms. Wolf. When she first tried to get the power on, then we got the power on, then she tried to get a building permit. Mr. Aaron's department told her it was an accessory structure and could not be used as a dwelling unit. She asked me what she could do with it. I said, you could use it for a she shed. And then she talked about how she might, am I at liberty? She was having marital problems and she might be moving into one of the duplexes and she wanted to use the she shed as a place where she could work on legal briefs and keep an eye on her son. And so therefore it had to have a bathroom, it had to have heat, it had to have all those things. And she talked about maybe one day wanting to put a kiln in there to focus on some pottery and other art making projects, but she didn't have the money for the kiln at the time. So that was all factually correct, but it all started, we never would have gone down that road had Mr. Aaron's department done their due diligence and knew that this damn thing was a house, had been a house since 1948, and had adequately and properly told the homeowner what the homeowner owned, then we would have been proceeding with this as a house.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. I believe it was not presented to us that way at the appeal. Anyway, I'm not going to be supporting this appeal. I will be voting against the appeal and upholding the standard of nonconforming use, which has long been a staple for our community and our neighborhoods. And thank you.
Just a reminder to council, we do need a motion on this at some point. Councilmember Roberto and then Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Aaron's, if council were to overturn the denial and determine that the owner hasn't discontinued the use when they turn the power off, are there any unintended consequences of that could occur? I mean, is that going to change radically the way you're looking at what, discontinued use looks like for other areas, like I think Councilmember Ryder alluded to, and our law director as well? Are there other areas where you could see this definition change affecting how you're conducting business?
I would have to confer with my legal counsel, but I will say this is not the only loss of use in the city that we have identified. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And we have held this standard for all of the others as well.
Well, and, I'm just thinking of hypotheticals or examples. If I have a, pre-existing non-conforming use that's a sign, and I can keep doing it as long as I'm keeping the sign active, and then I decide to turn the power off on it or whatever it is, and it triggers this issue, would you then have to come back if we make a decision here and overrule this decision where that's going to cause other issues? I'm just trying to give an example. Is that possible?
I think it would cause issues.
Okay. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Smith and then Councilmember Singh.
I just want to address Councilwoman Ryder's comments. I really, the context that you provided is very helpful to me in terms of the certainty about the expectation of residents being able to come to us and say, when's the clock stop? When can we actually address this place that's, somewhat sometimes overgrown or, some of these other problems? I think just to clarify, my opinion is about the decision and the criteria used for continued use is what I have trouble with on this one, in that, yes, continued use is important, but I think that lacks a bit more clarity for me to feel like there is intent or no intent, a clear discontinued use in regard to the zoning and use of it as it is. So thank you for that context. It does help me, but I also want to clarify my concern is the lack of clarity around what criteria is used to evaluate. And I realize that's different for every property, and that's why you're the administrator, Mr. Aarons, and we rely on you to do that. But I may disagree slightly on this one.
Councilmember Singh and then back to Councilmember Ryder.
Thank you, Mayor. I think what Councilwoman Fugit said really resonated with me, so I'd like to move to approve.
Okay, a motion has been made to approve the appeal. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made to approve the appeal and seconded. Are there further questions or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed?
No.
No, the motion to approve the appeal fails. Is there another motion?
Motion to deny.
Okay, the motion has been made to deny the appeal, has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember
I'd
Thomas?
very briefly say, appreciate all the discussion. I think what it really boils down to is just the application of the law. And as Director Swanson pointed out to me, that was really clear. If it works in inequity, that's for us to address. But I think if you apply the law in this case, we have to deny it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor of denying this appeal, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-2. Okay. Okay, next item, please.
11A is a resolution rescheduling the Beer Board meeting of December 23, 2025 to December 9, 2025, and rescheduling the City Council meeting of December 23, 2025 to January 6, 2026.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11B is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to have the city of Knoxville designated a broadband-ready community pursuant to Tennessee Public Chapter 228 4-3-709.
Motion made to approve has been made and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11C is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a 2-month extension to Agreement C-21-0398 with National Building Service Incorporated to provide janitorial services at various city community centers for an amount not to exceed $28,310.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11D is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a cost reimbursement agreement with Lakeshore Park Conservancy in an amount not to exceed $133,502 for Central Services courtyard paving work associated with Lakeshore Park's Phase 2 capital project.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12A is an ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4, Section 26-228, Section 26-302, and Section 26-410 of the Knoxville City Code, increasing the consensual tow rates and clarifying the definition of vehicle class and storage fees.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8 in favor, 1 absent, and 1 abstention. So 7, 1. Okay, motion carries.
12B is an ordinance to amend the Knoxville City Code, Appendix B zoning code, Article 5.4, Table 5-2, to add commercial district design standards in the CG1 zoning district and clarifying that applicable design standards for residential structures, Knoxville County Planning applicant, all districts.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12C is an ordinance approving the request of Homestead Land Holdings LLC for an amendment to the Northwest City Sector Plan from low-density residential to medium-density residential for property located at 962 North Gallagher View Road, leaving any special purpose land use classifications unchanged, 2nd District.
Okay, council members, there's some people who signed up to speak to this item. We'll start with those signed up to speak in favor. First is Thomas Krajewski. Mr. Krajewski, if you could come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you, Mayor. Thomas Krajewski, 1319 Southgate, 37919. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Homestead Land Holdings. I work with the company, and this matter is a zoning and plan amendment request, so 3 items together about the same property. The property is located on the corner of Middlebrook Pike and Gallagher View Road. And this property is a tract that is a little over 4 acres in size, and it has an old abandoned house on it The house has been vacant. The roof has fallen in and pretty blighted at this point with water intruding. And it's currently being used by either homeless or other passer-throughs. So it is, in my eyes, at least a blighted property. It's a tract that is a good transition tract in our eyes between a commercial use that is just to the west on the other side of Gallagher View Road with the Weigels and some more commercial property behind that, and then residential use on the other side, which is West Hills neighborhood. We had a case, a property that we worked on here recently in the last few months with West Hills. It was a rezoning at Broom Road. And at that time, we looked to do a townhome development and sought RN5 zoning on that property to enable the types of townhomes that we see fit for that market. We were successful there, and this was another property that was available in that same area of West Hills to do a similar type project. So we had requested the rezoning of that property to RN5. At first, we didn't believe that this property was part of the West Hills HOA, but having worked with them, we had one of the members reach out to us, let us know that it is in it. And so those conversations started in around July 8th and culminated in a meeting with the neighborhood July 24th. We had about 20 or 30 members of the neighborhood at that time sit and meet with us and allow us to share our vision for the property. Following that meeting, the neighborhood requested a second meeting on site on the property, and that was July 27th. And so a few days later, I went on site to go walk the property with the neighborhood and allow them to, again, get a better understanding of our utilization of the tract. We were set to be heard 2 weeks ago. The neighborhood asked for postponement. We agreed to the postponement. And after that postponement, I did request some action items from the neighborhood. In all, I received an email of 29 items, one of which was zoning related. The 28 others were really design related, engineering design and so forth. And so ultimately the neighborhood decided, the HOA decided to support a few adjacent landowners that are in opposition to this project. And I believe that is the stance that they have taken, at least last we spoke was this past Friday. To give you a little more insight on the facts surrounding the property, I think that staff, planning staff did a really good job putting this package together. They pointed out that this is part of the Middlebrook corridor. They pointed out that existing infrastructure and transportation are present. The CAT bus route is right there available, greenways, sidewalks, parks, you name it, it has it. This is a great opportunity for infill housing, and if we can do townhomes on this site, to do some middle housing. And we feel like that is an important piece for our community and can really be a great asset to the neighborhood as well. There's a lot of details that I have there that I'm happy to share. Ultimately, we sought RN5 zoning because that was best fitting for the size of townhome that we would like to build. 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a 25-foot wide unit, which really isn't allowed until you get into the higher RN zonings. And so that is why we sought RN5. When we heard that there was some opposition from the neighborhood, we looked to see if there are any other ways to develop this property that may be suitable on a lower zoning classifications. Ultimately, we've decided that RN4 could also work here. So we would be agreeable to RN4 zoning if that is something that council decides. But ultimately, we feel like this is a great infill middle housing development opportunity on the edge of the neighborhood. There's RN6.
Your 5 minutes has
Great.
concluded. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next person signed up to speak is Parker Bartholomew. Mr. Bartholomew.
Parker Bartholomew, 5406 Summit Ridge Lane. 24 units on 4.31 acres is 5.57 units per acre. RN1 allows 4.33 units per acre. RN2 almost allows 9 units per acre. The difference that RN5 allows is going to be attached townhomes. The difference between R1 and what the developer wants is only 1.3 units per acre. That's what we're here talking about, an increased density of 1.3 units over what is there right now. And it's less than what RN2 allows. There's been some conversation about missing middle and on this parcel. This parcel, it does not apply here, and so the lot widths and the areas are still going to apply. But just because MMH was limited to the TDR does not mean that the ideas in MMH cannot be expanded across the city. And those things are more density with smaller units. And they should be allowed all over the city, and we should be pushing for them. This property is along a corridor with access to transit, greenways, sidewalks, and other townhome developments are close by. 5.5 units per acre is a very reasonable density. In 1960, the city of Knoxville had 6.64 people per acre. Now, we have less than 3 per acre. The density in the city has been cut in half since 1960. At the same time, our median house prices increased 700%. The houses in West Hills along Kempton Road sold for $40,000 to $50,000 when the median household income was $15,000. This was in the 1970s. This is 3 to 4 times the median income allows you to purchase a home. Now, our median income is $60,000, and while the median house costs $450,000. This is a 7.5 times increase. For those who want to go back to the good old days, let's see how many people will sell their homes in the city of Knoxville for $240,000, because that's what it would be if we went back to what it was. That's what it would be to maintain the character of the neighborhood. Home ownership is now less than 30% of the households in Knoxville. Over 70% of our households are 1- and 2-person homes. In 1960, it was 38%. Yet our homes are getting fewer and larger. The requirement for large lots forced developers to build homes that were larger and larger to cover their land and development costs. By allowing more density, we give developers the option to provide a different type of housing. The largest demographic that's getting caught up in this is single seniors. The solution to this housing crisis is to provide more supply. I ask you to support 5.5 units per acre and rezone the property to RN5 so we can provide housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, that concludes the people signed up to speak in favor of item 12C. Now we'll move to the people signed up to speak in opposition to item 12C. We'll start with Mr. Lee Hume. Mr. Hume, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Good evening. My name is Lee Hume. I live at 6902 Haverhill Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm currently serving as president of the West Hills Community Association. The property in question is, the way our community is reacting is what was mentioned earlier in the previous discussion about property that Ms. Ryder brought up, and that has to do with the assurances that homeowners have when they move into a community that the zoning and the land use classifications provide that assurance so that people, when they're making probably the largest investment of their life, or one of them, then they have an assurance that that investment was well spent and that they can build a community. If you look at your map that I shared with you earlier, if you have a copy of it in front of you, I brought this map to help give a perspective on the property that's in question. On this map, this is a larger view of West Hills as a whole. And if you'll see the small red dot right here is where the property in question is located. On this particular map, you'll notice that you'll see a lot of yellow. This map is a KGIS map that shows existing land use classification. You'll notice that this large yellow area is low-density residential, which is where this particular property is located. If you'll look on the other map, This is a closer view of the property and shows the adjoining property that are owned by people that live and call West Hills home. This map shows that this area, again in yellow, is currently zoned RN1 single-family residential and has detached houses that have been in place now for decades. The property in question has been zoned residential for decades and also is zoned RN1, which the last developer that had plans to use that land has a memory center back in 2015, I believe was the year, worked with the community and said we were thinking about doing this. This is what we'd like to do. We had several meetings, worked with the developer, came to a resolution and said, okay, this plan's going to work. So in that case, they were able to work within the existing low-density residential land use classification, plus the existing RN1 zoning, but at that time it was R1 zoning. And it was changed to RN1 only through recode, but which really doesn't change, generally speaking, how land use is done and how that area is developed. So tonight I come before you on behalf of the neighbors in the vicinity of the Gallagher View Road property and the West Hills Community Association and the West Hills community to ask that you deny the 3 petitions before you to change the land use classification and zoning of this property. Since zoning of this area of West Hills was established decades ago, West Hills has grown and homes have been built with the assurance given to R1 and RN1 zoning, and the long-range and short-term classification through the sector plan and the one-year plan for low-density residential use, and which helped this area to flourish and to people to buy into the neighborhood. The result has been a positive one. Numerous homes of various description have been built. Residents and families have established deep roots, created lifelong friendships, and established a caring community. This property is the site of the former Walker family home built in the 1920s, and which remains standing. The existing sector plan, one-year plan classifications are low-density residential, and this RN1, and the same as the adjacent West Hills home on Robinson Road, Mars Hill, Kempton, Westboro, and Broome Roads. West Hills in this property is an established and popular neighborhood known for its beautiful setting,
Mr.
peaceful
Young,
atmosphere.
that concludes your 5 minutes. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Next person signed up to speak in opposition to item 12C is Larry Silverstein. Larry Silverstein. I am so sorry.
Larry Silverstein, 7808 Sheffield. I'm speaking on behalf of the West Hills Community Association and adjacent and nearby property owners living on Robinson Road, Mars Hill Road, and Kempton Road in the Westboro subdivision, which is on the east side of this property. I'm speaking in opposition to the 3 agenda items, 12C, 12D, and 12E. I'll be focusing mostly on the sector plan. If you're in the audience and opposed to these items, please stand up. Thank you. Regarding the proposed amendment to the Northwest City Sector Plan, this property is located off Gallagher View Road. The proposed access to the property is Mars Hill Road, a very narrow local street just off Gallagher View Road near the intersection with Middlebrook Pike. The subject property has hillside and slope protection on much of the property and also stream protection along Gallagher View. Nearby land has flood overlay protection and is part of the 10 Mile Creek watershed. Only approximately 2 acres of the 4-acre property can reasonably be developed. Since the 1920s, when the now vacant Walker home was built, this property has had a rural residential land use. We request that City Council deny amending the sector plan to MDR. Most importantly, it does not meet the required criteria and is not consistent with surrounding development, which is and always has been predominantly LDR with single-family houses and zoned RN1. Pursuant to the general plan, land use plan changes are based on one criteria, substantially changed conditions, and states, quote, "The Planning Commission reserves the authority to recommend land use plan changes based on substantially changed conditions. Substantially changed conditions include, number one, quote, introduction of significant new roads or utilities that were not anticipated in the plan and make development more feasible," end quote. The planning staff recommendation points to improvements to Middlebrook Pike that were made in 1995, 20 years before the 2015 adoption of the sector plan. The sector plan took into consideration those improvements. Likewise, Gallagher View was created in 2003, long before the 2015 adoption of the sector plan. Nothing new has changed with these roads. Number two, an obvious and significant error or omission in the plan. There is no obvious error or omission. Changes in government policy, such as decision to concentrate development in certain areas. There has been no policy change. Four, trends in development, population or traffic that warrant reconsideration of the original plan proposal. There is no trend in development, population, or traffic to warrant a change to MDR for this very small parcel of land. The staff recommendation refers to development from decades ago. None of the criteria have met. There is no significant change for this area. A review of the sector plan map for this area shows many surrounding parcels of LDR with RN1 zoning for single-family housing on three sides of the property. There's LDR across Middlebrook Pike. This parcel is part of West Hills, which is almost entirely LDR. While there is MDR on the other side of 5-lane Gallagher View Road on Middlebrook, there is no justification for a change to this parcel. It is important to note that requests for rezoning this property were denied in 96 and 04, and another was withdrawn in 2013. A very important rezoning was approved in 2016 for the Memory Care Center. The neighborhood met with the developer and negotiated an approval for planned residential. The staff recommendation stated, the proposed density of one dwelling unit per acre will not limit the number of rooms that can be proposed in such a facility. However, if the zoning is approved and the memory care facility is not constructed, the proposed density will limit the development potential for residential dwellings to that of the adjacent properties. This makes clear that everybody understood the intent for this development of this parcel should remain low at one dwelling unit an acre. If the building construction did not happen. It did not get constructed for unknown reasons. So what has changed since 2016? Nothing has changed that justifies a sector plan amendment to MDR. In 2020, RECODE changed the zoning across the entire city. As planned residential was eliminated, this parcel was correctly zoned RN1 in harmony with this parcel's history and the surrounding West Hills neighborhood. The environmental constraints of the stream protection, hillside protection, and existing flooding also support keeping LDR in place. We urge you, please deny the request to amend the sector plan to MDR. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak in opposition to item 12C is William Zayetz. Mr. Zayetz, if you could approach the podium, please start by stating your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you. My name is William Zayetz. I am a longtime resident of 1556 Robinson Road, directly adjacent to the subject property, also representing the Mars Hills community and our neighbors, very near to 962 North Gallagher View Road. And speaking with members of this neighborhood, one sentiment has been echoed unanimously was no. No to the sector plan change and no to the rezoning of this lot. Let me be clear, we're not opposed to development. We welcome it, but only when it aligns with the density character of our neighborhood and the Northwest City Sector Plan that was thoughtfully approved by the city. As a community, we are united in opposition to changing the sector plan from low-density residential to medium-density residential. Every property surrounding this lot is LDR, and the proposed shift to MDR is inconsistent with the immediate surrounding area and the Westboro neighborhood and West Hills neighborhood, which this property is part of. The standards required for a sector plan amendment to MDR have not been met. There have been no significant changes to this property that supports MDR. Furthermore, we are adamantly against rezoning the property from RN1 to RN5. This change would be a grave mistake that we simply cannot afford to make. We all understand that RN5 zoning entails what RN5 zoning entails, and it's glaringly clear that such a designation is not consistent with RN1 zoning pattern in our area. While the developer may claim an intention to build townhomes, we as neighbors are unwilling to take the risk that a future developer might exploit the RN5 zoning to construct high-density and several-story apartment complexes, something the RN5 zoning would allow. As a concerned citizen and the neighbor directly impacted by this, I implore you deny this rezoning request. The standards required for a rezoning to RN5 have not been met. Your decision profoundly affects the lives of every neighbor in close proximity to this development. My family relocated to this neighborhood as refugees from Ukraine in 1997 and have called this neighborhood home for over 25 years. My parents raised all 9 of their children in a house on a hill, rented for 12 years, before deciding to buy a parcel and build their forever home just across the street on Robinson Road. Now retired, my parents wish to spend the remainder of their lives in a quiet, peaceful environment that this neighborhood has provided for so long. In addition, my oldest brother, a father of 5, purchased a once rented home we all grew up in just up the hill. Why do we want to stay in this neighborhood? Because the peace and quiet LDR has provided for so many long years. Every neighbor here on Mars Hill Road purchased their home for the peace and tranquility that LDR guarantees. Building over 25 attached townhomes right behind our house would be a drastic adverse change to our property and should not be allowed. In addition, I would just like to ask that this is denied. I feel like, approving a rezoning as such, this would also entice and push for more RN5 zoning in the area near our home. And as we can see, that this is clearly not fit for the neighborhood. It's been LDR, and a lot of the zoning and the property around is LDR, and I think it should stay so. Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, that concludes the people who've signed up to speak to item 12C. Councilmember Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to talk to Mr. Krajewski, the developer, first. When we look at the maps, and we heard some discussion about this from the neighbors, I wanted to ask you about how often you use planned residential in your projects.
Thank you, Councilman. So 2 points on the maps and the planned residential that you make. I also have some maps here that I would like to share with council, if I could, please.
I'll have Mr. Johnson go down and get those for you.
Once those are in hand, I'll address the maps. But in the meantime, for the sake of time, I'll speak to the RP zoning or planned residential zoning. Most of our work as a development organization, we do single-family residential development exclusively, our company, Homestead Land Holdings. And most of our work is in the county because it's a little bit quicker, it's a little bit easier, and that is also facilitated by planned residential. More often than not, really almost exclusively, we use planned residential in the county. And so there is value there. And I think in this instance, there would be value as well. There was a property in 2007 on Mars Hill Road, directly to the south of the subject property, that was rezoned, and using planned residential, it was rezoned to 5.99 units an acre, which is just over what really we need to have a successful project on our property. And so planned residential was used on that property. It was successfully rezoned to 5.99 units an acre. And I feel like if we had that today, perhaps the conversation would be structured differently. So I do think that there might be some value there.
And just because I only have a little bit of time.
Sure.
So I hate to cut you off, but is the use of planned residential something used for your projects? Does it add some flexibility when you're dealing with challenged lots? Is that why?
It does. All of the property in East Tennessee, it has hillsides, it has, tops and bottoms to it, and creeks and waterways. And so we always have to design around those features. We always have to do a lot of creative engineering to create a successful project. And so that happens through that concept stage.
Okay. And you made a great point, which I've made many times over and over again, just like I did with CG1 and design standards, which we thankfully got on board just a minute ago. We need planned residential, and we need it fast. If you're going to develop in the city, you've got a challenged lot. Otherwise, it would have been developed. So why don't we have it? Let's get it. Get it back. Get it back fast. Thank you, Mr. Krasuski. And I wanted to say, I really do appreciate you working with the neighborhood. I appreciate you saying that you'd be willing to reduce the zoning down to RN4. And I know that you and the neighborhood were able to work together on Broom Road, and I appreciate all those efforts and the continued conversations you all have had. Just so I give some guidance on what I'm thinking about before my time runs out. What I ended up looking at here was, again, a very challenged property. You got hillside protection, you got stream protection. It was planned residential. You see, when you look at the map, it's C because that's planned residential. That's what they were using before. But we don't have that as an option now, so that's really hindering what can be done here. What I ended up doing was going back and looking at what guidance do we get from the code specifically about making these changes. And what we heard, from the neighborhood was correct. The issues that you would need to show for the land use change are the introduction of significant new roads and utilities, an obvious and significant error, changes in government policy, and trends in development, population, or traffic. The staff report shows that the changes made to Middlebrook were made in 1995. Those would have been incorporated in what happened in the sector plan in 2015. The staff report says the LDR is not necessarily an error. The staff report doesn't show any support for change in government policies. I don't see any trend in development of the surrounding property, which is all still LDR. So, the long and short of it is I just don't see the criteria here to support making these amendments, and I'm out of time, so I won't be supporting this one. Thank you.
Councilmember Parker?
Do you want to go first? No? Okay. Thank you, Mayor. And I want to say I appreciate the reminder about planned residential being a tool that we don't have, because it is one that often comes to mind for me. But really what stands out from the comments that have been made and the presentation is if multifamily housing can't go here, then where can it go without opposition? I think the answer is nowhere without opposition. But I also think of, a recent zoning change we just made in a small neighborhood in East Knoxville to RN5, where we did not require any infrastructure improvements in that neighborhood, and that is one could argue, one-lane road that RN5 development is going into. So for me, I see no concern with approving this rezoning based on what the staff recommendation is, and I'll agree that some of these upgrades happened before new planning documents and new zoning rules and laws were adopted by this council. So, but there are other arguments in here that I feel make this zoning change appropriate and in alignment with similar zoning changes that we have made as a council.
Thank you. Mr. Krajewski, you can sit down unless someone has a question for you. Vice Mayor Smith and then Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, I don't really necessarily have any questions other than this would appear to be, adjacent to a corridor, and I think that's one of the areas where I've heard advocacy for additional density. I do think along that corridor there is greater density than is there now. And I appreciate Mr. Krajewski's desire to reduce this to RN4. And I appreciate Councilmember Roberto's advocacy for planned residential, because I do think it makes sense. So I'm just saying all the things that maybe makes nobody happy with this decision. But I do think that RN5 could be good here because it is along that corridor. However, I do pause just as another example that without area plans, I mean, the city is growing. We need more density, but without more thoughtful area plans so that people can guide that and be on board with some development, because I think without those plans, neighborhoods particularly are put in a position of being perceived as don't want anything else. And I don't think that's the case everywhere. But I think without comprehensive planning, they're left to take things that come before them and try to wrestle with it into kind of what they know and exist. Now, if we're to do more comprehensive planning, and area plans, as I understand, is a desired priority for the administration and planning next year, and it produces neighborhoods that still don't want anything to change ever, I think that's a concern. But I do think that those neighborhoods, and not just this one, but all neighborhoods, should be given the opportunity to have thoughtful planning for their neighborhood. We need thoughtful planning for their neighborhood. Otherwise, we're just waiting for the next one to kind of see, is this going to work or not, and is this too much or too little? I don't think a significant amount has changed in the proper use of that phrase. I do think there's more housing need, yes, so I don't think you can use that as a carte blanche, allow for anything to happen. So the big gap I see in this whole process, not just for this development, but in general, is that we don't have community neighborhood level planning for the future. And neighborhoods are forced to be reactive, and nobody likes that. With that said, I do know that this developer is a conscientious one and has done good work across the city and county, and I think it would be great. But I'm also reminded by our recent conversations associated with voting that what I want in my district and would be okay in my district is not necessarily what is right for other communities. So I'm not inclined to support this. I do support a lesser density than RN5 because I think that's a place to meet in the middle. But without comprehensive planning that initiates very soon across our entire city, we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole with these types of things where we can't meet in the middle and we're not planning together. So those are my comments for now.
Councilmember Ryder?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with clarifying a comment that was made about something I said previous in the evening. I want to be clear that I don't think that our zoning maps and our land use are frozen in time and never to change just because they were a certain way when you bought somewhere. A lot has changed around me, and a lot has changed around a lot of people. What I did say was that we put something in our zoning code, and it is there for a reason and worded in a certain way to uphold the changes of use that were made over time in our code, and that we should uphold that. So I want to be clear about what I said. Moving on to this particular issue, I may have some questions and would like for Councilman Roberto to answer some in a moment, but I'm going to start with Ms. Brooks. Ms. Brooks, so for the record for everybody, this passed unanimously, all 3 agenda items on consent at the Planning Commission. And I've heard that apparently the neighborhood did not know about it. So my question specifically to you, moving on from that, is the basis for changes and the comments made about there's no changes to the area. When was the last sector plan updated for this area? I can't hear you. Oh. Oh,
It should be on, but try Mr. DeBose's.
it may be we have too many microphones on, is that it? Or
The light is on.
okay, we'll take turns turning ours off. 2015, you say?
2015.
I'll just
Let the
repeat what
record-
she says.
Okay.
I don't know what else to do here. Mercy. Okay, so how often is the sector plan changed? I'm gonna turn mine off so you can turn yours on, maybe. That's not the problem. Okay, okay. Mr. Frost is gonna bring you a microphone so we can communicate.
There you go.
Oh, here we go. All right.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Sir.
Well, how often are the sector plans updated?
We have not been updating the sector plans very frequently in the last decade. So usually every, I think it was intended every 5 to 10 years. This one is approaching obviously 10 years at this point.
Okay, so it's not outside of the norms of when it should be updated. The sector plan is fairly updated for this particular area.
I would say, given the changes that the city has experienced over the last decade, I would say that it is in need of an update.
Okay. Because I would say to the comments that what has changed about the area is that there's a great deal of change since 2020, 2021. And we're talking about exceptional rate of change in the entire Knoxville, Knox County area in the last 5 years. I also would like to point out that this parcel is on a 5-lane road, walking distance from a bus stop, at a greenway, and also borders, because there's right-of-way road access there at the parcel, and a little state-owned triangle from, I guess, the road expansions. There's public right-of-way that comes and wraps around the property that connects it to the other 4 or 5, at least 5 lanes there of Middlebrook. And so I would have to say what one of my other colleagues said is, if not here, then where? Because we're sandwiched at the corner of 5 lanes and 5 lanes. So we don't want anything but single-density housing in the neighborhood. We don't want anything but single-density housing on the outside of the neighborhood. Like, that's just not how we're going to grow as a city with everybody moving here and driving the cost of houses up exponentially. It's just not going to work, and it's what creates traffic. And what creates traffic is the non-access of housing within our neighborhoods drives people out into the county and out into the surrounding counties, and that creates the traffic. And that is why we are stuck sitting in traffic, because we've pushed folks to live out in Oak Ridge and Loudon and other surrounding areas because we've decided to freeze the density. And this is a perfect opportunity to increase the density. What I heard my colleague, Councilman Roberto, say is that there was discussion about a different density and maybe other conversations, so I'm curious about that. And I would say, because it was passed on consent at the Planning Commission, nothing else was discussed. So anything that we might discuss or any of the conversations that the neighborhood had, no matter what we would do, it has to go back to the Planning Commission. So I'll leave my comments at that for my colleagues to discuss further. Sure, the mayor's in charge, not me.
Well, I just wanted to add a point of information. You know, several people have talked about the need for a comprehensive plan update of community members, council members, and that's definitely something that we intend to do starting in the next fiscal year. It's a major undertaking, similar to Recode. It's not like there'll be one meeting and it'll be a series of meetings. I think Director Brooks said, you know, it's going to take a year to 18 months to do that kind of process, which is much needed, and I'm ready to do it starting next July. But it'll take some serious work to get it done. And I do understand from developers and the needs of our housing crisis that council will have land use decisions to make before that decision is done, both this council and the ones that come in future years, just because these comprehensive things, it's comprehensive means time consuming. So just wanted to clarify that is our plan. It just is going to take a little while. Councilmember Roberto, did you want to speak to Ms. Ryder's question?
Yeah, I think there might have been a question in there for me.
I want to know more about the discussion about
Discussion.
different zoning and the negotiations. and
Yeah, I think
conversations with the neighborhood.
Mr. Krajewski did say that they were willing to do RN4. That would require, so you still have to make the sector plan and the one-year plan amendments. And, you know, my review of the criteria, which is not just any change, there's specific criteria. It's introduction of a significant new road or utilities that were not anticipated in the plan and make development more feasible. All of that stuff happened before the sector plan changed. An obvious and significant error or omission, there isn't one. Changes in government policy, such as decisions to concentrate development in certain areas, there isn't one. Trends in development or traffic warrant reconsideration of the original plan, there isn't one. So my problem is just, I'm asked to review our standards and then apply those standards to the zoning when it comes up. And so that's my issue, is I'm trying to apply the law as is written. I think one thing that was brought up, and I'm a big advocate for, you know, doing mixed use on the corridors and trying to look at what we can do for housing on the corridors. My first look at this made me think, well, maybe this is on the corridor, like the Broom Road one was, which the neighborhood approved and had no problems with. And the two of them are working together on making that go forward. In this particular one, it's actually not, because separating between where the corridor is and where the proposed development is where there's that creekside protection and all those other things. So you can't go straight over to Gallagher View Road. You're going to have to go onto some of the side roads, which are very rural roads. They're small roads. And so that causes a challenge, I think, as well. So I don't really see this as a corridor space. I do see there are ones that do exist, but it's just not this one. And I hope I answered your question.
We'll move on to several other people have signed up to, have their lights on. Councilmember Singh.
Thank you. I have to go with, I really feel a lot of empathy for the folks who are not excited about the change and a change of life. This is something that we need to attend to, and each time we begin to make changes and add density, there's always opposition. This is where it gets really, really tough. A lot of these folks are my neighbors, we know each other, and they're not going to be happy with what we choose to do, but we have to look at the larger picture in our need of housing, and I think this is a very good spot for it.
Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you. Mine is more just a comment speaking what everybody else has said. I think one of the things that I see every time this comes up is that it is the fear of the worst thing that could go on that property with the zoning, not typically what the developer is bringing at the time. And I think that is a struggle. It's not fair to the developer. They don't want to spend $60,000 or however many $1,000s to do a huge plan if they know it's not going to be rezoned. And yet, because the neighbor doesn't know the plan, it is hard to then be excited about it. I mean, we saw that in South Knoxville when Young Height, that the senior living center wanted to change, and the rezoning was going to make it where you could put a cell tower there if that deal fell through. So I do think there is legitimate angst on both sides. I would say, absolutely, we have to do this. Mayor, I'm glad you're committed to it. We've needed it. I am concerned, though, that we continue to have to do spot decisions time after time after time, which is not fair to our residents or to the development community. So I don't know how you stop it. You can't. Time marches on. But if you'd told me when I got elected in 2019 we'd spend the majority of our time on land use, I'd have said, no, thank you. I didn't want to be on Planning Commission. But that's really how we spend the majority of our time. I do, Charlie, you were on Planning Commission. I will say, on first blush, yes, if you don't put it here, where else do you put it? Because Gallagher and Middlebrook make you think it's a perfect place. But as Mr. Roberto said, one of the concerns is that you don't enter or exit off of one of those main roads. And that, I think, it troubles me. If you can't go off because you say on a corridor, you think you just turn off the corridor right into the development. So that gives me some real pause. I don't know what I'll do. Y'all just keep talking.
Okay, Council Member Ryder, and then Singh.
Mr. Krajewski, did I say your name wrong?
No, that's right.
Oh, okay. I guess all the time, and somehow it works out. Okay. So looking at the map here, the property, where would the entrance and exit be for developing this property?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So this property is in conjunction, we have it under contract with conjunction with this small sliver of property that's directly to the southwest. It connects us to Mars Hill Road. Mars Hill Road is connected to Gallagher View Road. The connection point is a couple of 100 feet into Mars Hill. So it's at the very beginning of Mars Hill. There's no other residents immediately around there. The residents start further up Mars Hill. And so the likely connection, because of some of the creek issues and other things that have already been discussed, would be right there at Mars Hill, leading straight into Gallagher View.
All right. Thank you for that. And can you tell me what the conversations were about RN4? Like if you were amenable to RN4, how did you end up with a request for RN5? Just curious.
So initially, RN5 we felt like was most congruent with our needs. Roughly 25-foot townhomes, which create 1,800 square foot homes, was the target, and we felt like RN5 enabled that best. The biggest driver there were the dimensional standards tied to the different RN zonings. And so whether it was lot width or total lot area, we kind of got pushed into RN5 by wanting to build a kind of a more efficient unit. And so then when we had opposition, we really wanted to try to work through that and see. And so we asked our engineer to revisit and relook at everything and say, can we still build townhomes, maybe increase the lot size with RN4, but still achieve a type of unit that fits? And he came back and said that he could do that. So we're riding on his word there, but he thinks that he can do that. So RN4 still enables us to do the type of project at the price point that we need to do it at, but lessens the zoning intensity some, just to try to find some middle ground.
Okay, so the last question I have is, I'm introducing a whole new concept, possibly. We don't have planned residential as we did in the past, even though Councilman Roberto is correct. We argued for it during the recode process and we were shot down. So if anybody's unclear about that. And that was the comprehensive rewriting of the zoning code. I want to be clear, we're talking about updating sector plans, not a comprehensive revision of zoning code. There are sector plans that are not updated for a lot of the economic and market and population shifts that we've seen in the last 5 years, which how would planning have anticipated that, right? Like how did anybody anticipate what's happened in the last 5 years? So we're behind the 8 ball with what's going on with our market and with the economy. So the other tool in the toolbox when we got rid of planned residential was, I don't know, Ms. Brooks, what do we call it? Planned what? I call it unicorn zoning, but keep going. I'm not a fan.
It's called the planned development
plan development.
Process.
And someone, to be able to do a plan development, it goes through the planning commission, but they have to offer a public benefit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Krajewski, is that something that you looked at? Are you aware of?
I'm not familiar with that, Councilwoman, I'm sorry. You know, for us, anytime more than a certain amount of property is created, and I believe it's 7 parcels, but I may be incorrect there, it triggers us to have to go back to, or anytime public infrastructure is created, like roadway, then we actually have to go back to Planning Commission to have a concept plan heard. And so that concept plan is an engineered plan, and it is also part of the public process. So it is an opportunity for the community to voice their concerns, comments, everything that they would like to see addressed. That exists. I understand that it doesn't exist with this body, but because we are in the business of creating fee simple property and not necessarily creating condominium regimes or those sorts of things when we can. Our preference is to create fee simple property. We are creating individual parcels. And so I don't know a time that we have not gone back to have a concept heard on our project.
Okay. I'll let Councilwoman Singh speak.
Don't sit down.
Councilmember Singh, go ahead.
Thank you. What I'm thinking about is what Councilman Roberto said about having to, I want to encourage walking, and it is a great spot. You could go grocery shopping, you can do all kinds of things from there. I don't know if this would be a public benefit, but we're talking about Vision Zero stuff too. So would you be willing to extend a bridge over the creekway or something like that to make walking in that area safer?
I believe there's an existing sidewalk already on the frontage there of Middlebrook Pike, and there is a greenway trail, Cabot Station, I believe is what it's called, that connects back into the West Hills Park area. And so those amenities exist, but if there is any sort of opportunity to do that, we would certainly evaluate it. You know, we would be cautious for it to not become cost prohibitive to, you know, trying to hit a target price point for homes. But nonetheless, it is something that we could look at.
I just think it's something important too. We're putting it so close to walkable areas, we need to make it safe too. Thanks.
Councilmember Thomas and then Roberto.
Yes, I'm still trying to struggle a bit, or still struggling a bit with this corridor, whether this is or whether it isn't, how much access the neighbors have, you know, the ease of ingress. I was hoping maybe someone from the neighborhood maybe could come down, maybe Mr. Silverstein or Mr. Hume, and talk a little bit about your observations about how this is would meet kind of the corridor criteria that we kind of like to have.
Mr. Silverstein.
If I heard you correct, you were asking about the corridor issue?
Yeah, and I think you were distracted as well. Councilman Roberto talked some about how this really didn't fit as the type of corridor with ease of access that we seem to be wanting to put greater density of. And then the applicant was talking about how this is actually conducive to ingress and outgress on the corridor and the infrastructure's there. I'm trying to get a hold on whether it is a kind of a ease of use place and infrastructure's already there or not.
No. First of all, it is definitely not on either corridor. You cannot have access. Right now, there was a driveway to that one house from Gallagher View, but that crosses the greenway, and there's no way you can use that as the access. Everybody, I think, agrees on that. So the only access is from Mars Hill Road, which is this tiny little road. They're going to have to cut through hillside protected area, go up a hill, cut down a whole bunch of trees just to even get onto this property. So and it's floodplain. You cannot develop on this land on the side of it. It's got a huge buffer on Gallagher View that they can't build on anyhow. They can only use probably 2 acres of this whole 4-acre land. And so the problem, what they're trying to do is they're going to try to put 24 attached units in a 2-acre piece of land right adjacent to the single-family houses that Mr. Zayats referred to. They live right next to that property line. So I don't see how this can possibly considered a corridor, like where Broom Road is and Middlebrook Pike. Middlebrook Pike is a corridor, but even there, the way they've designed it, they can't use Middlebrook Pike as an access. The access to that property is going to have to be on Broom Road, which I think is going to be very problematic. Now, that's going to be up to city engineering to figure that out. But their concept plan, which is going to MPC next week, has only access from Broom Road. So there is no corridor. This is a very unusual piece of land. I don't know if any of you went out there besides Mr. Roberto has been there. It's elevated up. It's a square. It's a nice flat square, but it's surrounded by hillside and stream issues and flooding issues already. It's just the neighborhood agreed that the memory care center could work. It was a self-contained one building. You had people who aren't going to be making a lot of noise. They're not going to be driving a car. That's why they're going to would be living there. And we said, we can live with that. We can live with that. We didn't fight that. As long as the density was going to be 1 unit per acre. And that's what it was approved at planned residential, up to 1 unit an acre. And that assurance, which you can read in the staff recommendation, this was 2016, that was the assurance that the neighborhood had that no matter what happened, we would still retain the same kind of a property that would not negatively affect the close-by neighborhood. I think I've said more than you asked me, but...
No, I just wanted you to turn it off.
Your microphone.
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure I got the other side, and I think we're about out of time, so I appreciate your comments.
We definitely do not think it's on a corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, so is Mr. Claybo's not here?
Unfortunately, he's not here, but
Okay.
maybe someone who is here could take
No
a-
one
try
from
to answer.
engineering particularly. Mr. Rosenberg, I don't know how familiar you are with the property. So the driveway for the current property accesses Gallagher Drive. So I'm looking at it right now. These folks go down a driveway and they get right onto Gallagher Drive. And it is not within 25 feet of the intersection of Mars Hill and Gallagher. Because I know from my district and many things that happen in my district where everything is on 50-foot parcels, it's very hard to have a driveway connected to, say, Central or Broadway and redevelop because you're often within 25 feet of the corner and you cannot reuse a driveway. So I guess, is there anyone here that can tell me why this driveway can't be used, Mr. Grajewski? Because I'm just going to say, I understand the neighborhood doesn't want this, but this is a parcel of property that is facing 2 5-lane roads. So why can't that driveway be used?
Mr. Krajewski, no, go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, this came from planning staff.
Okay.
When we first submitted this property and started looking at it and discussing it, we asked for planning staff's recommendations of use, and they said that a better connection would likely be Mars Hill, if possible.
If
And so
possible,
initially, we only had the main parcel under contract. After planning staff gave that recommendation saying that consider using Mars Hill, we went and actually got the other parcel under contract after the fact. A connection could potentially be made directly to Gallagher View. There would have to, but the creek does run through there, and so there would
Not
have,
where the driveway is currently?
I think it's right next to it, close enough that we would have to do a certificate of no rise. to then be able to accomplish a driveway connection at Gallagher. And so, again, we just went with what was the recommendation, that a better, cleaner connection would likely be off Mars Hill. And so that's really where we've landed at this point. But really, this site has not been fully engineered, so I can't speak to exactly where it will fall by the time it would be all said and done.
Ms. Ryder, you probably can't see, but Director Brooks has her light on, so you might be able to answer with some more expertise. Go ahead, Ms. Brooks.
Yes, thank you. I just want to clarify that planning staff would defer to city engineering on the appropriate access point for this or any property if it was called into question. And so a lot of these details get worked out at that next phase of the project. So when they come in and submit their concept plan, and in this particular instance, is when that would be decided where they could access and what type of improvements they would need to make in order to make that access work.
Okay. Councilmember Roberto, so there have been times where we have sent things back to Planning Commission to consider lower zonings. I'm not sure that we've ever done this, and it's the only tool in the toolbox we have. Was there any conversation about sending it back, or would there be any consideration for sending it back and looking at plan development versus, say, RN4?
I guess the question I would have is, well, I mean, we could obviously send it back, have them look at it again. I would imagine that if we asked Mr. Krasuski about that, he would probably say that he has a contract, he's probably already gotten an extension. I don't know if he has time to go back to planning, because they're not going to get on this month, it'll be next at the earliest. So, I mean, I think we could, it's an option. I just don't know that it's an option that's feasible for the parties. That's the only issue. And I also don't know, I know there was some discussion about, the applications for RN5. There was some discussion about being willing to do RN4. We'd have to have the lawyers weigh in on whether or not that could even be a motion, but I think the answer I would give is no one had a discussion about planned development. I think it was great to bring it up, and I just wish we had planned residential that we could use here. And I know you do too, so.
Mr. Frost, in my 8 seconds left, our options here are to approve, deny, or send it back for consideration of something else to the Planning Commission.
Put your mic on, please.
Let me ask Director Brooks, was RN4 ever considered in this process?
Not that I'm aware of. And definitely not at the Planning Commission meeting.
Well, I mean, Mr. Swanson, so this would be RN4 is a less intense use than RN5, I believe. So could they consider a less intense RN4?
I think they could, actually, because they've considered a more intense use. They could consider a less intense use. They couldn't consider a more intense use.
Without sending it back.
Okay, I thought we couldn't consider anything that wasn't deliberated at the Planning Commission, but okay, thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. And I thought the same thing, so I'm glad we got the clarification. I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion to deny and see if there's a second, if folks want to vote, and if they want to continue the debate.
Okay, motion's been made to deny item 12C. That has been made and seconded. So, ready for more discussion?
Mayor, I just have one.
Vice Mayor Smith, and
Just Mr. Hume, you raised your hand around regarding plan development. Would you like to come forward and say something? Yes.
I just wanted to share that Mr. Krasuski and I had a conversation Thursday afternoon. He was calling me to follow up on the postponement that was requested 2 weeks ago to give me an update on what they had come to as a conclusion following a few days of studying and looking at options. And in the conversation, he told me that if it weren't RN5, no other zoning would work with their business model for this property, and that they had to have the RN5 in order for them to be able to move forward on this project. We tried to entertain the idea of staying RN1, doing single-family housing, which, if that were the case, that could allow between 12 and 14 homes to be built on the property. He again said, though, that's not really their business model, and that they wanted to stay with the possibility of building 24 townhouses on the property. One question that I haven't asked, but would be curious to find out, is the price point for these townhouses. I know that homes, single-family homes in this section of West Hills, there's a development just about a half mile down the road on Broome called Ashland Keep. 30 homes are being built on 12 acres of land there, and the going price right now, starting price for a home over there is $900,000. And they are selling and building out right now as we speak. And I think that there could be a similar opportunity on this property if somebody has that imagination and would be able to live with that kind of a business model. So 12 to 14 houses that could possibly be in the price point of the high hundreds. And again, I'm not sure what the price point would be on these townhouses, but that has to be a determining factor in this. And again, like I said, when we talked about changing zoning lesser than RN5, he said it would not work with their business model.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, first just a comment about the Planning Commission discussing this. And when I first got this packet, I was really surprised that this was on consent. Generally, only things that are put on consent are basically things that are not controversial at all. And this one, at first blush, struck me as going from RM1 to RM5. How did it get on consent? I think we would have all benefited if it had been discussed at the Planning Commission. Having said that, a couple of things. I don't think that the criteria have been met for the sector change. I don't see that. And also, there's been some good discussions, and I've been a big champion of density on the corridors where there's infrastructure, absolutely. There's some excellent points have been made. I just don't feel comfortable enough to support this rezoning with kind of the differences I've heard about whether or not this really fits on a corridor, loose definition, and whether there will be access there and the problems won't be had. And I've got problems with kind of the terrain here. This is not an easy one, I grant it. Everybody's making some good points, but I just don't feel comfortable supporting this, so I'm going to vote to deny it.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I have you to come back to the podium, please? Just want to ask you, what would be the price point on the townhomes?
Sure. Probably realistically between 500, 600,000, something to that degree. We felt like that was a better fit for being on those major roads, even though there is some stream and vegetation and things in place. You could still hear the cars. It is still a major corridor. There's 10 lanes of traffic on two sides combined. And so I think that, $1 million homes here are probably not the answer. That would not be something that I think our company would feel comfortable, our builder would feel comfortable placing in this location, as opposed to the Oakland Keep project that Mr. Hume spoke about. So, they, on a price per square foot, they would, I would say likely and almost out of necessity be higher than existing housing stock because of the cost of new construction. It is so high that on a square foot basis, it would be at least the same, if not higher, but hopefully at a lower overall price point to make it more attainable for a different segment of the population.
And if the zoning were downgraded, would you still be able to complete the project?
I'm sorry?
As if your zoning were to be downgraded, like to RN4, would you be able to complete the project?
Yes, at RN4, we could still do the project. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in support of this rezoning and of the arguments that have been shared. The one that seems to be, The issue at hand seems to be a neighborhood that wants to maintain its single-family home character. And, the question being whether there have been any changes that would allow for in this area that would allow for this zoning. And I wanted to point out the language that I found. Some of this has been raised by my colleagues, but, in here specifically, I agree with the oversight that was identified when the sector plan was previously changed. And planning staff said the current LDR classification is not necessarily an error, and it reflects the existing land use on the property. However, considering the parcel's location next to an arterial intersection and its adjacency to transit, sidewalks, and a greenway, more residential intensity could have been considered here. And I believe that's true throughout our zoning code and throughout our sector plans, that we have not properly allowed for density in areas where we have infrastructure to support it. It's only recently become a policy more embraced by the City Council to acknowledge a need for more housing in our city. And that's why we are behind on the ball, because areas like this that we look at that seem like obvious locations for medium density, not even the most intensive use of this land, but medium density development, that should have been captured in the plan. So I agree with planning staff that, and it's one reason why I've been open to these spot changes, because I went through that recode process as a resident, not on council, and felt like we needed more zoning for multifamily. And so coming out of recode, I knew that that was going to have to be a priority because we were already in a housing crisis. And then it got worse. When I first ran in 2017, we were in a housing crisis. And I talked about my difficulty finding a house in East Knoxville because I couldn't get a mortgage for over $100,000. So I understood the working class folks in our city who were actually looking for affordable housing. Now those prices, that was 6 years ago, that's beyond imagination in Knoxville. And and people haven't had salary increases to the point that they can afford these prices. They can't afford those $1 million houses. I appreciate a developer trying to create a product that has a market in our city, that has buyers ready and able to more likely afford that price point. But we're getting so far away from affordability and meeting the needs of what our city, or the residents of our city actually need. So I know that there's a motion to deny on the table. I support this. I support this zoning change, and to not delay efforts, I would strongly urge that those opposed to RM5 support changing the zoning to RM4 tonight so that this project can move forward.
Councilmember Ryder?
Mr. Grajewski, you and council, you can come to the podium, please. You and Councilman Roberto have both said that you were amenable and had discussed RN4 with the neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay. So the neighborhood's issue is that that doesn't bring them to the table to review something like a planned development plan, because we don't have that tool. But I'm sorry, planned residential. We do have planned development, which is where you go and you say, hey, I'm going to put a greenway in, or I'm going to build a bridge here, or this, that, or the other. So the only way, well, to me, that, Mr. Swanson, that would be a significant change. That's not a downzoning. That would be go back to Planning Commission. If a motion for, I know, a motion for a planned development.
Yes, that would have to go back.
Okay. Is that something that you would be willing to consider, have the conversation with if it went back to Planning Commission?
You know, unfortunately, in this situation, I think it would likely kill our project because we are under contract. We do not own this property. We have a purchase agreement in place, and it has a due diligence period that we've already been stretching, trying to work through some of these issues with, now two postponements that we've had. And so really, I don't think we have enough time to go back. We would be at the mercy of the property owners to agree with us to go back, and we would have to negotiate that.
But an RN4 is something that you could work with.
Yes.
To my colleagues, we have voted for sector plan changes for far less than the change that we see in this area. So I'm going to make a motion for, we have a.
Well, you can make a substitute motion.
Make a substitute motion to approve RN4.
Second.
Oh, we have to vote on, I guess we have to vote on Mr. Roberto's motion, and then we
Right,
can,
but we
if
also-
it fails.
We also have, this is the sector plan vote, then we have the one-year plan vote,
Okay.
then the actual rezoning, so.
Right.
Right, but
So-
Mr. Frost, if we vote on a sector plan change.
Right.
So Councilman Roberto has made a motion to deny the sector plan change. And he has a second. So if that fails, nothing else comes forward.
Right.
If
I'm sorry,
if that
if that
fails,
approved.
If the sector plan is denied, the change to the sector plan denied, are items 12D and CE moot?
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm just asking Mr. Frost or Mr. Swanson to confirm that. Yes, Mr. Swanson says that's right. So if Mr. Roberto's motion to deny passes, items D and E are moot.
Okay, well,
If it, yeah.
okay, but then you're with the unique situation of you approve the two things and then you get to the rezoning and then what happens there? If there's not,
if
just
you
get to
approve
whatever.
the sector plan amendment and the one-year plan amendment, then what's on the agenda is RN5, and you would do a motion to amend to an RN4.
Councilmember Parker?
Is there a sector plan amendment needed to do the zoning change to RN4?
Ms. Brooks?
Yes, there is.
So at this point, could we not offer a substitute motion?
There's not a motion on the floor to approve the sector plan change.
We have, I'm sorry.
So procedurally, you all have to vote up or down on Mr. Roberto's motion, and if it fails, then you can consider some of these other options about the sector plan.
So just for clarification, if council members support a change to RN4, they should vote against the motion before us so that we
Right.
can make another motion. Okay.
Correct. Okay. Does everybody understand what they're voting on? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to deny the change in the sector plan, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion fails. Yeah, I can do a roll call if you want. It seems like it was 7-2 or something like that. 6-3. All right, that's Mr. Johnson's job. Okay, roll call vote.
Councilman Roberto.
I vote yes for the denial.
Councilwoman Singh.
No.
Vice Mayor Smith. Councilman Thomas. Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Councilwoman Helsley. Councilwoman McKenzie.
No.
Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman Ryder.
No.
Mayor, the vote is 4 in favor, 5 opposed.
Okay, motion fails. Is there a new motion, or is there any clarification needed from Ms. Brooks or other people? Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Director Brooks, would RN4 be covered by the proposed sector plan for medium-density residential? I assume it would?
Yes, it
Okay.
would.
So, Director Brooks, if council members later on in the agenda, item 12E, are going to consider moving it from RN5 to RN4, they don't require any changes to item 12C if it's approved?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a motion on item 12C, an additional motion, or do you guys want to talk about it more? Mr. Krajewski, I had just a question, whether you had said that the 24 townhomes on this corridor, you could do 24, whether it's RN5 or RN4, is what you guys have determined.
That's my understanding from
Okay.
our engineer, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Singh?
So I think the motion would be to approve C, the sector plan change.
Yes. Okay,
That's the
Councilmember
motion.
Singh makes a motion to approve item 12C, seconded by Councilmember Ryder. Do you want to discuss it, Councilmember Singh?
I just wanted to say something, that we have to approve $500,000, $600,000 houses, which is not anywhere near affordable for most folks. Just trying to fix this housing problem shows where we are right now. And when we keep passing this buck on, the next vote is going to be $1 million houses.
Well, Councilmember Singh, I agree, and if I were voting, I would be voting to approve these. I think it meets the criteria our community has asked for more housing on the corridors especially. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to approve item 12C. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-4. Next item? Yeah.
12D is an ordinance approving the request of Homestead Land Holdings LLC for a one-year plan amendment from low-density residential to medium-density residential for property located at 962 North Gallagher View Road, leaving all special purpose land use classifications unchanged, second district.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? I'm sorry. Mr. Krajewski has signed up to speak in favor of item 12D. You want to? Okay. You're available for questions?
I'm available for questions.
Okay.
That's correct.
Parker Bartholomew has signed up to speak, okay? And Larry Silverstein has signed up to speak in opposition to item 12D.
Larry Silverstein, 7808 Sheffield Drive. I'm speaking on behalf of the West Hills Community Association in opposition to the proposed one-year plan amendment. The criteria for one-year plan amendment are very similar to the criteria for a sector plan amendment. The one-year plan sets out some excellent explanations of the purposes of the one-year plan and the criteria for amending it, and are quoted as follows. Chapter 1 of the 2024 plan states, on November 2nd, 1982, Knoxville voters approved by referendum a revision of the city charter which strengthened the relationship between planning and zoning. The charter states, the one-year development plan shall provide the basis for zoning of all properties within the city limits, end quote. The one-year plan by law and practice is developed with a high level of community involvement. The required updates keep the plan a current and accurate guide for community growth, preservation, and enhancement. The structured amendment process allows the entire community to participate in the considerations of changes to the plan and provides more complete information on which to base decisions. Staff utilizes the one-year plan as a tool when reviewing rezoning and sector plan amendment applications. Future zoning changes must conform to the plan or meet the criteria for an amendment. Due to the short-term nature of the one-year plan and the widespread community involvement, the need for plan amendments should be rare. The annual update is in fact the built-in mechanism best suited for amending the plan. Amendments to the plan between updates should be kept to a minimum and warranted only under the following 4 circumstances, which form the basis for planning staff review. 1, an error in the plan. 2, a significant change in the development pattern or in the completion of a public improvement, road, park, or sewer, which changes the basis on which the plan was developed for an area. A change in public policy unanticipated by the plan. New information, including new plans and studies by Knoxville, Knox County Planning becoming available, which reveals the need for a plan amendment. These criteria have not been met, just as in the sector plan. They have not been met. It's plain and simple. We have laws. You just approved the one-year plan just a few months ago. Why did you not change that if you thought that there was a problem with the one-year plan? I'm ad-libbing here, which I don't like to do. The one-year plan defines land use classification and defines low-density residential and provides location criteria and permitted zoning districts. Quote, this development is primarily residential in character at a density of less than six dwelling units per acre. This type of residential development includes detached single-family dwellings and duplexes. Primary residential patterns should be neighborhoods. The main neighborhood form should be detached residential development that is of sufficient size and designed to promote neighborhood formation and land use stability. Location criteria, protected from through traffic by avoiding direct access to major corridors or arterial streets, buffered from incompatible land uses. Permitted zoning districts, areas should be zoned AG, EN, RN1, or RN2 as appropriate and provided for under the zoning ordinance. Then it talks about medium density residential classification, usually 6 to 24 dwelling units per acre. Major land uses include detached single-family dwellings, duplexes, townhouses, and multifamily. Location criteria, near community activity centers, including schools and colleges, parks, and community commercial office nodes, as traditional areas between more intensive non-residential uses and low-density residential neighborhoods, on collector or arterial streets, along or near corridors that are served by or proposed to be served by transit, with densities proposed to be above 12 dwelling units an acre. Permitted zoning districts, areas should be zoned RN3, RN4, RN5 as appropriate and provided under the zoning ordinance. It is clear that this proposed one-year amendment is not supported by these location criteria for land use classification MDR, and that land use classification LDR is much more appropriate for this property. Therefore, we request that this amendment be denied and reject the recommendation of the planning staff and planning commission. Thank you for your consideration.
Council, that concludes the people who signed up to speak on item 12D. Is there a motion? There's already been a motion. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Singh? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, I think we should do a roll call. I think it's 5-4, but I don't know.
Councilwoman Ryder. Yes. Councilman Roberto.
No.
Councilwoman Singh. Vice Mayor Smith. Councilman Thomas. Councilwoman Fugit. Councilwoman Helsley. Councilwoman McKenzie. And Councilwoman Parker.
Yes.
Mayor, the vote is 5 in favor, 4 opposed.
Okay, motion carries. Next item, please.
12E is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 962 North Gallagher View Road from RN1 district to RN5 district, leaving all special purpose and overlay districts unchanged. Homestead Land Holdings LLC, applicant, second district.
Okay, council members, there's some people signed up to speak on this. Mr. Krajewski? If you can speak, or if you want to be available for questions. Okay, Mr. Bartholomew? Okay, Mr. Silverstein? You want to speak on item 12E? You signed up. Okay, next is Clarence Hill.
He's coming.
I know, I'm just getting people ready for the next one. Mr. Silverstein, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Sound like a broken record here, but the standards for rezoning appears in the City of Knoxville zoning ordinance at 16.1 E3 standards. There are 5 standards listed in the zoning ordinance, and all 5 must be met in order to approve a rezoning. For reasons I do not understand, the planning staff recommendations for rezonings only includes 4 of the 5 standards. The one that is omitted is D. The proposed amendment shall be consistent with and not in conflict with the Knox County General Plan and its component parts, including adopted sector plans, corridor plans, and related documents. 16.1 E3. Following conditions must be met for all amendments. A, the proposed amendment is necessary because of substantially changed or changing conditions in the area and districts affected, or in the city generally. There have not been substantially changed or changing conditions for this parcel. The staff recommendation focuses on housing developments from long ago on Middlebrook Pike, but these were primarily zoned RN2, not RN5. Recode set the zoning in 2020 for this parcel as RN1. Nothing has substantially changed in the RN1 West Hills neighborhood. Likewise, the road improvements on Middlebrook Pike and Gallagher View were at least 20 years ago. Nothing has been done to improve Mars Hill Road or Robinson Road. It's a real stretch to assert that there have been substantially changed conditions. The proposed amendment is consistent, B, the proposed amendment is consistent with the intent and purposes of this code. Staff recommended, refers to RN5 serving as a functional transition between traditionally single-family and duplex neighborhoods and more intensely developed residential or commercial areas. Other than a Weigel store several blocks away on the opposite side of Gallagher View Road, there are no commercial areas near this parcel. So this RN5 district is not a transition. The zoning ordinance section 1.2 purpose of the code states, promote orderly development of the city and implement the adopted Knox County General Plan, which incorporates more specialized plans, including adopted one-year plans, sector plans, corridor plans, and small area plans adopted by City Council. This application is not an orderly development, considering it is a major unwarranted change from LDR sector plan and RN1 zoning, which surrounds this property. It is inconsistent with this location criteria for LDR. This standard has not been met. C, the proposed amendment shall not adversely affect any other part of the city, nor shall any direct or indirect adverse effects result from such amendment. This development will adversely affect the traffic conditions on a very narrow Mars Hill Road and the already very congested Gallagher View Road intersection with Mars Hill Road. The staff recommendation does not address impact on already overcrowded schools or cumulative impact with a new and under construction very large residential development just several blocks away, stating that city stormwater engineering will enforce its regulations and the slope analysis will be done, does not address other areas that will be adversely affected. The standard has not been met. The proposed amendment shall be consistent with and not conflict with the Knox County General Plan and its component parts, including sector plans, corridor plans, and related documents. RN5 does conflict with the current sector plan and is inconsistent with the surrounding area. The general plan contains many important development policies, beginning at page 61. These policies stress the importance of future development being compatible and harmonious with what currently exists. This proposal for RN5 is not compatible with the existing development pattern and surrounding properties, and thus is not consistent and conflicts with the general plan. The standard has not been met. The fifth and last standard for approving a rezoning will be addressed by our last speaker, Clarence Hill. But I just want to repeat, which I know I've already lost twice, and I'm probably going to lose a third time. But you cannot ignore what is the properties that surrounds this property. You cannot ignore that. It's RN1. It's low-density residential. All of West Hills is low-density residential, RN1, with very, very few exceptions. I don't see how you can ignore what is in the requirements, the standards, the criteria to say that you can rezone this to RN5. RN4, the developer told us, I was there, I heard it. He said, we cannot do this except for RN5. He asked for a postponement 2 weeks ago with 1.5 hours before the meeting was scheduled to begin and said that they were working on a new proposal. No proposal was ever forthcoming. No proposal was forthcoming. RN4 is the first we've heard about it, that he says now we can make it work at RN4. There's something really wrong here, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I'm losing my cool, but this should be a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer. I'm sorry. I urge you to vote against this rezoning.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak in opposition to item 12 is Clarence Hill. Mr. Hill, if you could state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in opposition to this proposal. My name is Clarence Hill, 718 Broom Road, and I'm a board member of the West Hills Community Association. Continuing with Larry's discussion regarding the rezoning standards, there are 5 standards listed in the zoning ordinance, and all 5 must be met to approve rezoning. The previous speaker addressed 4 of those 5. The remaining standard is Standard E, where it states, where adequate public facilities are available, including, but not limited to, schools, parks, police and fire protection, roads, sanitary sewers, and water line, or are reasonably capable of being provided prior to the development of the subject property if the amendment were adopted. So how does this property stack up against this standard? First, there is not currently adequate infrastructure in place to deal with flooding and stormwater drainage that occurs adjacent to the property at the intersection of Mars Hill and Gallagher View Road and the stream protection area and floodway zoning district adjacent and nearby this property. Second, the schools serving this property are overcrowded and none are in walking distance. Third, the parks referred to in the staff recommendation are not in walking distance. Fourth, reference to enhanced roadway infrastructure is not true. If referring to road improvements done decades ago and does not reflect the current inadequate Mars Hill Road, which is closest to the property and the access point to the property. Although some public utilities may be adequate, many listed are not. The takeaway from this discussion, both Larry's and this point here, of the 5 rezoning standards are, 1, the requirement for the zoning ordinance is that all of the 5 standards must be met. They have not been met. 2, the RN5 is not appropriate for this property. 3, the applicant says RN5 is necessary. Now he says RN4 is acceptable, which first we've heard of that, in order to have a lower minimum lot size per dwelling unit to increase the number of townhouse units on the property. This is not a valid rationale for approval of RN5 or RN4 zoning, which is totally inconsistent with the adjacent and surrounding West Hill RN1 properties as shown on the area maps. Finally, the various environmental constraints on this property are problematic for RN5 zoning and for access to the property from Mars Hill Road, which is a sloped forest of very tall trees and flooded during any significant rainfall. None of the standards for rezoning have been met. We request that the amendment to rezone this property to RN5 be denied. And same for RN4. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, last person signed up to speak on item 12E is Lee Hume. Mr. Hume? Okay. That concludes people who signed up to speak to this item. Is there a motion? Councilmember Singh.
I'd like to make an alternate motion to same wording, just to change it from RN5 to RN4.
I think we'd need a motion to approve and then, as written, and then an amendment.
Okay, so move to approve.
Okay. Motion made to approve item 12E. Is there a second? Okay, motion's been made to approve. Did you want to do an amendment to the
Why,
motion?
yes, I do.
Okay.
Same, except for RN4.
Okay, there's been a motion to amend the original motion from RN5 to RN4. Is there a second to the amendment? Yes? Okay. Second, the amendment has been seconded. Are there any questions or discussion about the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of this amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is the roll call going to be the same as the last one? Okay, then we'll just call it 5-4. The amendment, the motion to amend passes. Now we're back to the original motion as amended. Does everyone understand the motion on the floor? Seeing no lights on, I'll just go ahead and call all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, are the votes the same as the last two? Okay, motion carries. I think we should take a little break here. Let's reconvene at 9:05.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, so Mr. Johnson, if you would go ahead and read the next agenda item.
12F is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 5303 Jacksboro Pike and 3225 Essery Drive from RN1 District to RN2 District. Coquilla Estates LLC, applicant 4th District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12G is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 1214 Callaway Street from RN2 District to RN4 District. R. Bentley Marlowe, applicant 6th District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. There's someone signed up to speak in favor of this, Mr. Bentley Marlowe, and then Parker Bartholomew. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Bentley Marlowe, 322 Douglas Avenue, 37921. So this parcel is located right next to another parcel that I had rezoned RN4 last year that went through smooth. Planning report on that parcel recommended the rezoning, and I think it's important to bring up that report from last year because I don't think much has changed. In that report, planning determined that the Mechanicsville neighborhood is a mix of single-family and multifamily residences, and that has sidewalks, bus stops, corner markets, and already has medium density throughout the neighborhood, and so this was appropriate. It said that RN4 is consistent with what you find in Mechanicsville, and said that the amendment would not cause any undue or adverse impact to the surrounding area. This newest report that came out this year almost reads as if it's from a different universe. It states pretty much the opposite on every one of those points. It's kind of baffling. The facts are that this is just requesting a minor extension of the RN4 to cover, in this one lot to the south, and in the next one lot to the north. And the reason for this is to save a historic home, save the mature trees, and to increase density. How we got here has been a messy road, trying to navigate Missing Middle. It was brand new. Chad Weath, Codes Enforcement, asked me to tear down 1214 Callaway. It's in very bad shape. And so I pulled a demo permit back in February, and I started the process of doing due diligence and trying to talk to Amy Brooks with planning on how Missing Middle would work on this lot. And Amy was surprised that it was being demolished. And when she got a copy of my demo permit that I provided her, I got a stop work order and began an 87-day hold to sort out this, because it was determined that this house and all the houses on that block face are historically contributing structures that appear on some registry with the National Park Service. I had no idea. It doesn't show up on the overlay as a historic overlay. That you have to go to like some other overlay in KGIS. I didn't even know it existed to find this overlay. But apparently, these homes, according to Ms. Crockett, are historically contributing structures. So I have gone to the effort of trying to figure out how to save it. It's going to cost me a lot of money to save this house, but I'm willing to save it. But if the numbers have to work, and to do so, put a duplex, a small duplex in the back, because I can't do a garage apartment or ADU. I think that would be the most accurate and probably get me the numbers I need, but I don't have that option in my tool belt. But what I can do is missing middle, perhaps, with RN4 zoning, which would allow me 2 structures. I could go in the back, by the alley of this very deep lot, and build a very small duplex that looks like a garage apartment, and convert this house to a duplex. So that's 4 dwelling units. Conversely, I could tear the house down, because the demolition delay is no longer in effect, and the demo permit's still valid and in my hand. Tear the house down, and I can build a 2.5-story quadplex. It wouldn't fit the historic neighborhood. It wouldn't fit the character. It would change the block face. It would be out of proportion, both in height and scale, with everything else on that block face. It just simply isn't a good solution, but I'm allowed to do that. I'm asking for permission to save the historic home. There's a mature tree that I can work around and keep everything more or less cohesive with the neighborhood. But I've had to go through this rezoning process, which has taken a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of uncertainty. And that's really the long and the short of it. So if we approve this, and I believe I've satisfied all of what little I had, one group, Omni, that's not in, I'm not in the Omni overlay, but Omni had some opposition at planning, but once we met on site and we've talked, I am not aware that they're still opposing, and they're not here tonight. And they told me that they, as a group, had no more opposition after we met on site. We talked about my plans for preserving the historic structures. So my time's about out, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
And the next person signed up to speak on this item is Parker Bartholomew. Mr. Bartholomew, if you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Parker Bartholomew, 5406 Summit Ridge Lane, 37921. Will, I think, passed out it's the handouts that are in front of you. The first one is a map of the Mechanicsville area. All the parcels that are highlighted or surrounded with RN4 with the red box around them those properties are currently zoned RN2. However, they have multiple structures, multiple primary structures on those lots, and they are all duplexes, which is exactly what Bentley's trying to do with the 2 that say subject. So I think I wanted to give you an accurate representation of what is in that neighborhood right now. The next page is the original staff report from when he rezoned the larger parcel, the one that with 16 on it, there on Callaway Street. And there's the underlying parts that I'd like to draw your attention to. They include a need for increased medium-density housing. The area is consistent with the development of RN4. It will not adversely impact the surrounding area and is not in conflict with other plans. Please mind you that this was before Missing Middle passed, and they were already saying that there was already need for more housing. So when the original or the first rezoning happened on this street, it was before Missing Middle had passed. So staff now says that because Missing Middle has passed, the size of the lots are no longer appropriate. Currently, with no rezoning, Bentley could tear down this house and build a 4-plex. And if anybody wants to see what that would look like, it's currently happening on 2 streets over in the CG1 area. And there's an existing house sitting there. And I really hope you all go and look at what could start happening, because that's a perfect example of what's going on. There is a single-family house, and there is a 4-plex that is maybe 5 feet off the property line that's towering over a single-family house. And because of Missing Middle, this is what's so important, and this is one reason Councilman or Vice Mayor Smith, you mentioned the goalpost moving at times. And what we do is messy. And Councilwoman Fugit, I appreciate you talking about developers and how plans change. Missing middle has been a very messy thing that we've been trying to figure out, right? And so this is one of those things where we were trying to figure out what could go on these lots. And we've now think we have a path, and that is RN4, which allows for 2 primary structures, which is very similar to the BZA that we had just a few minutes ago. There is a path, and we're trying to figure out what that path is in order to get this density and to get things that are affordable and to provide housing that can happen. And so missing middle has given us a path to do that. But what missing middle would allow is a 4-plex on that parcel. No matter how small it is, it will allow a 4-plex there. So 2 duplexes with 2 units is no more intensity than what's allowed there by right now. And so the only difference that we're asking is that we can separate these two, that we can have two primary buildings. Because one of the things in missing middle that I hope we change is we're not allowed a single-family house. So that single-family house is not allowed to stay and us put a duplex in the rear. It can't. The only way to make it work is to turn that duplex or that single-family house into a duplex and then put another one behind it. It is something that I think is a big mistake in missing middle, and it is something that will cause, that right there, that one item alone will cause more demolition than you guys can even start to imagine, is not having a single-family house in missing middle. If you could have a single-family house, you could leave it, you could repair it, you could fix it, and you could put a duplex in the rear. Bentley's one of the few developers that live in the area that he's redeveloping. He's the last person that wants to hurt the character of Mechanicsville. This property has sidewalks, a functioning alley. It's 100 feet from a bus route. It will not increase the urban sprawl. He's trying to save the existing mature trees and saving a structure. This is exactly the type of development that we envisioned with missing middle. And there's plenty of examples that you all can see in Mechanicsville right now with homes that Bentley has renovated. They fit within the area. They look historical. They've got nice siding on them. I think the only issue that Omni has is he doesn't use wood windows all the time. And he likes to use aluminum clad because they last a lot longer. Other than that, everything that we're trying to do here, I think, is exactly what we've been asking to get done. So I would ask that you approve the rezoning.
Thank you. Council members, that concludes the people signed up to speak on item 12G. Councilmember Ryder.
So, Mr. Marlowe, the current property, so I spoke to Ms. Brooks, and her rationale for the difference in the RN4 on the larger parcel was because of the size of the parcel and what you could do on the size of the parcel. This parcel is 30 feet wide?
I think that's correct.
Okay, and it's 100 and some change deep?
145 deep, maybe, I think.
Okay, but 30 feet wide?
Yes.
So Ms. Brooks said that that was the reason that the Planning Commission did not recommend upzoning on this property. So currently, this property has a single family or a duplex on it?
Single family.
So it has a single family unit on it. And your plan is because the RN4 zoning will allow you to build a second primary structure.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the intent. So you'll have 2 houses stacked front and back, or one of them will be a duplex and one of them will be a single family?
Currently, the plan is that the original house will be turned into a duplex because my most recent communication with Ms. Brooks' office is that we cannot mix a single-family house with a missing middle housing type. So I've got to convert the existing house to a duplex, and then I can put a duplex in the rear.
Ms. Brooks, can you comment on that?
Mr. Marlowe is correct. Yes, when we were looking at the middle housing standards, the intent was not to encourage that mix of uses. So we've had those conversations with plans review and inspection.
So if someone owns a property in the TDR to employ the missing middle housing, they have to convert or demolish and replace the existing single-family and make it something else?
They don't have to. It's a choice to use the middle housing standards. They can convert the single-family home. That's, the middle housing standards kick in when you're contemplating those types of anything above one unit. Does that make sense? So that was the intent behind those middle housing standards.
So with a 30-foot wide lot, what can Mr. Marlowe do with this parcel with an existing single-family house on it, if he weren't to use missing middle? Nothing but missing middle
Let's see, this is
or
the-
single-family?
This is the one, I often get these two confused here, that he's received, the one that was coming up, he's gotten BCA variances for the middle housing standards. It's RN2. It is considered a small lot of record. So, there is the option to go through the special use process to consider doing a duplex
As it exists?
as it exists.
But the way for him to achieve 3 to 4 units is to do missing middle housing, and then he can have 2 principal structures on 30-foot wide lot.
I don't think you have to use the middle housing standards to do that. And if you, as the Planning Commission recommended, the RN4 district does allow 2 principal structures on the property.
Okay. All right. And then, Mr. Marlowe, just for clarification, the Omni Group is still opposed. They said that you somehow might not be aware of that. So just passing that on.
Okay, thank you. About the lot size, these 2 pages that was in Parker's packet he handed out, they are small RN4 lots nearby over on West Baxter Avenue. Some of these lots are as little as 19 feet wide. Second page depicts the intersection of Dameron and Ray Street. Some of these RN4 on Dameron are 2/3 the size of my lot.
Oh, I don't have that packet. Sorry.
Oh.
Um,
Sorry, I thought
no, that's okay.
we had enough copies for everyone.
Okay.
So there are plenty of small lots that are zoned RN4 close by. I've found them in almost every one of the TDR areas. The corner of Harvey and East Emerald has a row of RN4 lots with shotgun homes on them. They're all 2/3 the size of my lot, and they're surrounded by nothing but RN2. Whereas my lot here in Mechanicsville's got RN4 next door, it's got RN3 down the street, CN at the end of the block, much more mix of density in Mechanicsville than,
Right, but I'm just going to make the point to you that these tiny lots of record have single-family shotgun houses on them predominantly. Maybe occasionally, some of them have been subdivided into duplexes.
Thank you. Are there other council members, any questions or comments? If not, we can go back to Ms. Ryder if you have more. Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, there is a motion to approve on the floor, I believe. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12H is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 1224 Callaway Street from RN2 District to RN4 District. R. Bentley Marlowe, applicant, 6th District.
Motion made to approve. And there's been a second. Mr. Marlowe, you have 5 minutes if you want to address council.
Bentley Marlowe, 322 Douglas, 37921. It's the same thing, just on the other side of the house, or the other side of the pre-existing RN4. So this is a minor extension of RN4. This lot is 25 feet wide, so it's a little bit smaller, but it's the same plan, same idea. Going to build a small duplex in the back with parking off the alley. The idea is these will be small 1-bedroom units, one over the other. There'll be 2 stories. Won't really be visible from the street. Won't contribute to the street parking dilemma that may happen with more density because they'll have 2 spaces off the alley, all of which are compliant with missing middle regulations. I think it's a good use of the land. It still leaves a yard. There'll still be a yard that'll be shared between the existing structure and this one, in between the 2 structures. So yeah, I think it's checking all the boxes. My goal is to be able to get these to where these will be a little bit lower than market rate on the rents, just because by putting them in here in this configuration, I'm getting more bang on the land, which is the sunk cost. Thank you.
Okay, next person signed up to speak to item 12H is Parker Bartholomew.
5406 Summit Ridge, just real quick. One of the key points with missing middle is it removes the lot coverage and the lot square footage and the lot frontage widths. So it's something that we've identified, had lots of discussions about, but these narrow lots, it specifically removes the lot sizes. So that's all. Thanks.
Okay, council members, that concludes the people who signed up to speak on item 12H. Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Marlowe. What is market rate for this property?
Market rate for a one-bedroom unit is about $1,500 a month in Knoxville right now.
Okay, thank you.
I'm hoping to be below that.
Vice Mayor Smith, any other questions? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12I is an
Thank you.
ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 6504 Dean Hill Drive from IG District to O District, DD Development Ventures Corporation applicant, Second District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. There's nobody who signed up to speak to this.
Oh, man.
Any questions or comments? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have public forum. First up, Bentley Marlowe. Do you want to speak at public forum?
Just briefly. So the housing crisis, Bentley Marlowe, 322 Douglas, 37921. The housing crisis is very real, and it's continuing. We just had over an hour and a half discussion about putting houses on a corridor. And I find it very enlightening that the very members of council that have repeatedly said that corridors are the places to put this housing were opposed to it. I'm also shocked that any neighborhood would oppose housing that they're pricing at $600,000. I just finished a 2,000 square foot home in Mechanicsville, and despite my best efforts of providing every bit of detail I could to the appraiser, I couldn't get it to appraise at $600,000. Couldn't even get it to break $550,000. I would love to see some $600,000 homes in my neighborhood. I know not everyone can afford those, but those are nice homes. Like, I don't understand why there would be opposition to nice homes. I thank you all for the support and approval of RN4 over in Mechanicsville. At least we're a neighborhood, with the exception of apparently Omnia still plotting against me, that's embracing density and housing of all types. And we have a disproportionately large amount of low-income housing in Mechanicsville. But despite that, I choose to live there. I've chose to redevelop the neighborhood, and I'm quite proud of that. Because one thing I believe very strongly in is that when we mix incomes in a neighborhood, we make everybody better. We get to live a more rich and fulfilled life by sharing struggles with our neighbors that are on all walks of life, all socioeconomic statuses. And I think that it would do West Hills a damn big world of good if they'd open their minds and their hearts and allow some low-income subsidized housing over there. Because it's flabbergasting to me to see how much effort and energy went into opposing $600,000 homes on a corridor. $600,000 homes on a corridor. Guys, we're never going to make any meaningful blip. Missing middle, mixed use structures on corridors, none of it's going to work if we don't actually allow developers to get out there and build. And when we have to come here and ask for permission and spend months in front of planning and BZA and infill and historic zoning commission, and at any one of those moments, something could derail us. One vote could derail the entire project. It takes the motivation out of it. Because a lot of times, particularly, I mean, we're in a little bit better spot. Interest rates are starting to come down. But when those rates were going up in 2021 and 2022, one hiccup You want the developer to go talk to the community group and come back in 30 or 60 days. His pro forma's busted because the interest rate shot up 0.5 point, 0.75 point. If this is a crisis, let's treat it like a crisis. Let's see rezonings be heard on emergency. Cut out some delay for the developers. Let's see more proactivity in addressing some of these mistakes in our zoning code, like we brought forward tonight with our BZA appeal, like I brought forward 2 months ago with the BZA appeal. Let's get in it, roll up our sleeves, and let's get in it and get it fixed. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next person signed up for public forum is Charles Mulligan. Charles Mulligan, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
My name's Charles Mulligan. I'm member of St. John the 23rd Parish on 1710 Melrose on the campus of UT, and part of a team that meets the Greyhound bus on Wednesday nights at 10:20 and 10:40. One Wednesday night, there's other teams that meet at the other Wednesday nights. An organization called KEDA, Knoxville Immigrant Transit Assistance, has teams that meet the bus on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday every week. That's just the foundation for what I'm going to say. In spring of 2022, the Greyhound station downtown closed. It had been sold a month earlier. During COVID, the number of buses coming to Knoxville went down pretty dramatically. And since the Greyhound station closed, they have not been able to use Knoxville as a transit site because they can't sell tickets here. The current site is on Kirkwood off Melrose. It's a curb by a parking lot just before a cat stop. And you can say, well, that's an appropriate spot. But the cat stop is chosen because it's for residential people that live around there. When a commercial and transit, interurban transit bus is stopping there, there's nothing appropriate around that stop for them. People get off, they're isolated, they have no place to recharge their phones. It's the middle of the night, they never expected to get off at a curbside on Kirkwood. They have no place to eat. Women have no place to stay. We've given a ride to older women with their luggage to the Value Inn down the road. We've recommended to single women that they go and sit in a Waffle House to be safe overnight. They have no place to go. And they're not warned by Greyhound that they're being let off in a lit-up parking lot. It's nice lighting, but there's no place around it. Now, 3 cities in Tennessee have bus stations where there's bathrooms. That's another major problem for people that wait for the bus for hours, no bathrooms. They find a place, of course. They have also places that tickets can be sold, so that if you have a problem with your ticket, you can remedy it right there in Chattanooga, in Nashville, and in Memphis. Knoxville has none of this. And as a result, the bus transportation available in Knoxville is way, way down. Now, I've read that Memphis and Nashville and Chattanooga all are planning rail connections by 2035. We don't. We have no bus, no rail. And here we are saying that we are a green city, trying to be a green city, but it's only low occupancy cars and airplanes that you can use for interurban travel in Knoxville. I'm asking for imagination on the part of city leadership and city council and county leadership to develop a plan to make Knoxville a transportation hub and a place that treats arrivals decently. I can tell you stories about people that get stranded here. people come up to us and they say, all right, well, how do you get to Kingsport? You know, this is at 10:30 at night. How do you get to Gatlinburg? And we have people that are arriving to visit someone who doesn't show up. What do they do at that point? The security guard's there. He's been told he can let no one in his car. There's winter coming. There's rainstorms. There's excessive heat. And the people at this stop have nothing. Now, I know it's a private company. Oh, we can't touch a private company. And yet the airport, other places are developed in concert with planning, with a forward look. I urge you to make Knoxville an adequate interurban transit hub. They offered a place. I'm done. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. The last person signed up to speak this evening in public forum is Keith Richardson. Mr. Richardson, if you could state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Keith Richardson, 2526 Jefferson Avenue. If you're hesitant to apply local government funds to facilitate either a temporary or permanent bus station, please allow me to remind you that the city of Knoxville created and owned an airport, including a terminal, out of which privately owned individuals and companies operate air service. Blount County even participated with the city of Knoxville in purchasing the land on which the current McGee-Tyson Airport is located. Over the years, the city of Knoxville and federal funds, including military sources, aided in making improvements to that land. Around 1986, operation was transferred to the Metropolitan Knoxville Airport Authority. I'm not sure who actually still owns the land now. While the primary function of an actual station is to serve local folks waiting to board buses, a station would also return to allowing transfers between east-west routes to those going north and south. We don't have that function now. We used to have it when there was a station here. In our situation right now, a mother in Greenville wanting to visit her daughter in Atlanta is now routed through Nashville before heading south. A son living in Crossville would have to go to Nashville and wait 4 hours to catch a bus to Louisville and another transfer to get to his father in Cincinnati, a 13-hour and 20-minute journey. If the daughter of that Greenville mother lived in Cincinnati, her ordeal would last 16 hours and 10 minutes, if the buses are on time. But rather than look at the terminals of the past, why not envision and invest in an intermodal transportation center that will better serve the future, a way to facilitate more efficient mobility for the citizens of Knoxville and our entire region. Currently, over 75% of the bus riders earn less than $45,000 a year, and 1/4 of those will have to forego an intercity trip if there are not buses. With an increasing portion of our economy in the service industry and tourism a critical component, should we not want to facilitate the ability of workers to access better job opportunities, not just concentrate on relieving traffic jams for tourists in their single occupancy vehicles? Won't intermodal connections become even more important as the transportation industry increasingly moves to autonomous vehicles? Rather than approaching our current dilemma as a one-off real estate challenge, we encourage the city to engage the professionals charged with transportation planning. Does a regional TPO even have interstate bus service on its radar? What is the role should the Tennessee Department of Transportation play? Just because the University of Tennessee did away with its School of Planning, that is no reason for the city to try and play it by ear. Some immediate steps you could take are, 1, enact an ordinance requiring any interstate bus service to provide or utilize a terminal where passengers have access to bathrooms and a sheltered waiting area. Include daily fines until they comply. Also, why should travelers using other alternative bus companies going to DC while sleeping on recliners, or folks going directly to New York City for $100, meet their buses in different West Knoxville parking lots. Let's look at the total system as it is, currently fragmented. Second thing is to use the bully pulpit to assemble the decision makers of Greyhound, Northgate Associates, whoever the phantom partners are, the reluctant United Way, and even the Monday Properties trustees to allow a one-year lease of the very workable space that was under consideration in Northgate Plaza. To do that until a permanent solution is found. Failing that, take a dead serious relook at the CAT station downtown with more financially reasonable terms. The blazingly hot summer and its violent thunderstorms have been brutal enough. Please anticipate that we will continue to advocate for a solution before the rigors of winter arrive, and once again, we find ourselves wheelchair users left to wait unsheltered for long-delayed buses in single-digit temperatures. I've emailed to each of your government email accounts photographs of some of the circumstances we've encountered. Thank you. Whoa.
Thank you. Council members, that concludes public forum, and without objection, this meeting is adjourned.